Chapter 436. It's not up to you. Old Master Li was furious. The shares of the company, everything in this family. I won't give you a single cent. You will leave the family with nothing. He was furious. In the past he was satisfied with this son-in-law, but now he hated Su Qinghui. Su Qinghui knew that this matter would not be so easy. He had already made all the preparations. But those preparations did not include divorce. Dad. Qianxue. This is my fault. I admit that I was too young and impulsive. You can punish me however you want. But I will never divorce Qianxue. Don't even think about it. I will kick you out of the Li family. Get out of here. Get out of here now. Old Master Li was full of energy. As he spoke, he did not forget to hit the ground with his cane. Compared with Old Master Li's agitation, Li Qianxue was much calmer. She patted her father's hand and turned to face Su Qinghui. If I don't divorce, will I let you continue to torture me? Su Qinghui looked at her and his lips moved. He wanted to say that he did not mean to torture her, but he could not say that. Li Qianxue sneered, and her voice was as cold as the 12th moon. Su Qinghui, for so many years, you have used my love to torture and humiliate me. I have endured it because I love you, but now I don't want to endure it anymore. Let me tell you, I want a divorce. Su Qinghui looked anxious. He stood up and wanted to pull Li Qianxue's hand. Qianxue, I don't want a divorce. I can promise you anything else. Go away. Get out of here. I don't want to see you. Li Qianxue waved his hand away. Although Old Master Li was old, Su Qinghui had been hit twice on the shoulder. Although Old Master Li was old, he had been training hard, and the strength of his hand was not light at all. Now that Li Qianxue waved his hand, he took 2 steps back. The movement was too big, and his shoulder was in pain. But now he couldn't care less. Qianxue. Su Qinghui. Li Qianxue looked at him, as if she understood his concerns. Don't worry. Although you are heartless to me, I will not be unjust to you. All these years, you have also contributed to the Su family. I won't really let you leave with nothing. You can go to a lawyer now and write down the terms of the divorce. As long as it wasn't too much. I'll agree. Qianxue, that's not what I meant. I don't care what you mean. I don't care. I don't want to know. I want you to leave this place right now, leave the Li family. Qianxue. Su Qinghui was really anxious. He could give up money, the Li Corporation, and everything related to the Li Corporation. But he couldn't get a divorce. He absolutely couldn't. Get out. Su Qinghui. Let me tell you, I don't want to see you. Now in the future, I never want to see you again. Qianxue, I was wrong. It's all my fault. I beg you, give me another chance, okay? Get lost. You want me to give you another chance after what you've done? You can forget about it. Li Qianxue didn't want to talk to him anymore and chased him away again. Because of her determined attitude, Su Qinghui couldn't help but look at Old Master Li and Su Yusen. Old Master Li didn't pay any attention to him. Su Yusen looked at the series of changes that happened today. It wasn't that he didn't sympathize with Su Qinghui. Looking at him like this, especially when he was beaten just now, he even felt that Su Qinghui was very pitiful now. But there must be something hateful about a pitiful person. Meeting Su Qinghui's gaze, he just turned his head away and didn't look at him. No matter how bad Su Qinghui was, he was still his biological father. He really couldn't bear to see him like this. The sound of a car came from outside the door. Li Qianxue originally wanted to chase Su Qinghui away, but now she couldn't help it. She was in a hurry to rush to the door. She didn't even notice that she was standing by the coffee table and almost kicked it. Mom, be careful. Su Yusen reminded her. Li Qianxue stood firm. She looked at Su Yusen and then at Old Master Li. Old Master Li's emotions hadn't calmed down yet, but now he understood that Su Qingsang was back. He was different from Li Qianxue. He had just heard the news and hadn't had time to digest it. At this moment he couldn't wait to see Su Qingsang. Li Qianxue almost rushed out, but she was still worried about Old Master Li, so she held him first. She stood there, not knowing whether to stand or sit. She wanted to go up and greet them, but she couldn't restrain the nervousness in her heart. While she was struggling, Su Qingsang and Hu Jingyao had already come in. Su Qingsang's mood had been very perturbed along the way. From knowing her background to accepting it, she had spent a lot of time to adapt. It wasn't easy for her to adapt. She also decided to let it go. But she just happened to know that Li Qianxue knew about her background. The secret she wanted to hide finally couldn't be hidden anymore. She wasn't ready yet. How could she face Li Qianxue? She only wanted to see her. And now she was about to see her. But when she really stood at the door, she felt shy. She sat in the car and didn't even dare to get out for a moment. It was Hu Jingyao who pulled her out of the car. After getting out of the car, she walked very fast at one moment and very slowly at another. No matter how big the Su family's garden was, it was only a few minutes' walk. Soon she reached the door. Go in. While she was hesitating, Hu Jingyao gently pushed her into the door. Su Qingseng didn't even have time to hesitate before she saw Li Qianxue. She had seen her too many times in the past 20 years. However, she had never thought that Li Qianxue was her mother. She didn't even dare to think about it. Her biological mother. This realization made her stand there and not dare to move. She just stared at Li Qianxue blankly. Li Qianxue didn't move either. She looked at Su Qingsang and thought that this was her daughter. She hadn't accompanied or taken care of her daughter for a day. Her emotions, which had always been calm, suddenly lost control. Her eyes were blurred by tears. She stood there, and her footsteps were heavy. Su Qingsang saw her eyes turn red, and her eyes turned red as well. She stood at the door, timid, her eyes expectant and yearning. She wanted to be close, but she wasn't used to it. That expression pierced Li Qianxue's heart. She rushed over and held Su Qingsang in her arms. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Su Qingsang's eyes became wet. She was hugged by Li Qianxue and didn't dare to move at all. I'm sorry. I'm really sorry. How could she fall asleep? How could she not take a look at her child at the first moment? How could she let Su Qinghui take Su Qingsang away? For more than 20 years, her child was by her side, but she didn't know her. The heartache that she had suppressed just now came back again. Li Qianxue only felt that her heart was about to break. Qingsang, I'm so sorry. Su Qingsang finally had a reaction. She shook her head gently in Li Qianxue's arms and said, No, you're not sorry. Even though she wasn't close to the Su family, she had to admit that Li Qianxue didn't make things difficult for her. Qingsang. Hearing her words, Li Qianxue was even sadder. Qingsang, you're my daughter. You're actually my daughter. I didn't know. I didn't know at all. It's been so many years. She stepped back a little and held Su Qingsang's face with both hands. For so many years, you've been by my side. I watched you grow up, but I didn't know that you were my daughter. I'm really confused. Su Qingsang also wanted to cry because of him. She shook her head hard, and her tears fell uncontrollably. No, I don't blame you. I really don't blame you. It wasn't her fault. It was Su Qinghui's fault. Su Yusin and old Master Li were behind them. They watched the mother and daughter hug each other and cry. No one said a word. Su Qinghui stood there and stared blankly at the mother and daughter, reuniting in front of him. He had been conflicted and in pain, but at this moment, he let out a long sigh of relief. Finally, everything returned to the original track. Finally, everything went back to square one. But was it really back to square one? He knew very well that some things had changed a long time ago. It wouldn't change just because Su Qingsang recognized Li Qianxue. For example, he lost Li Qianxue. He lost her last tolerance and tolerance for him. And her love. He only had Li Qianxue's hatred now. Once this realization came to him, Su Qinghui almost couldn't stand. His expression became more and more confused. Why? Why did things turn out like this? Hu Jingyao looked at Su Qingsang's tears. He rarely saw her cry. The tears that flowed down her cheeks were as hot oil. Unexpectedly, he didn't stop Su Qingsang and Li Qianxue from reuniting. This was her identity, this was her family. You really don't blame me? Li Qianxue looked at Su Qingsang's face. Her face was full of disbelief. You should blame me. You should blame me. Su Qingsang had too many reasons to blame her. Any one of them could be a reason for her to blame herself. No, I really don't blame you. Really. Su Qingsang wiped the tears on her face. Seeing Li Qianxue like this, She couldn't bear to see her like this. Unlike the sympathy and gratitude she felt for Xiang Kaiping, she had a desire to be close to Li Qianxue from the bottom of her heart. She had this feeling for many years. However, at that time, she was still young. Because of the situation at that time, she suppressed this desire again and again. Now, she didn't have to suppress that desire. She could be close to her without any scruples. Li Qianxue looked at her with a pained expression. "Qingsang, if you really don't blame me, can you call me Mom?" There were still tears in her eyes. She looked at Su Qingsang expectantly and nervously. Su Qingsang's heart ached a little because of her reaction. She raised her hand to wipe her tears. Her movements were very gentle. Her nose was sore, and her eyes were dry. A lot of emotion sniffled and said softly, "Mommy." Li Qianxue cried again. "Call me again." Chapter 437. Mom. Su Qingsang seemed to know what Li Qianxue was thinking and called her again. Yes. Li Qianxue hugged Su Qingsang again. My daughter. My daughter." Li Qianxue hugged her tightly. She changed very tightly, but her slender body had great strength at this time. Su Qingsang was almost out of breath in her arms, but she didn't push her away. She didn't even have the thought of pushing her away. Her hands were hanging by her side. Her fingertips moved, and then dropped again. However, when Li Qianxue tightened her arms again, she raised them again, and gently wrapped them around Li Qianxue's waist. Everyone was looking at Li Qianxue. Only Hu Jingyao noticed her movements. His heart trembled. He took a step in the direction of Su Qingsang and Su Qingsang, but then stopped. "Qingsang." Li Qianxue was so uncomfortable that she couldn't say a word now. She could only hug Su Qingsang tightly. She had never taken care of, or accompanied her daughter for more than 20 years. Su Qingsang was really out of breath in her arms. When she saw the hidden tears in Su Yusin and Old Master Li's eyes, she finally calmed down a little. Mom. She gently patted Li Qianxue's back. Calm down. Li Qianxue shook her head. It was too painful. It was really too painful. What could be more heartbreaking than her own daughter being by her side? But she didn't know it at all. Mom. Su Qingsang thought for a moment and raised her voice a little. I can't breathe. Hearing this, Li Qianxue finally relaxed a little. However, she refused to let her go. Instead, she held her hand tightly. I'm sorry, Mom. I didn't mean to. I'm fine. Su Qingsang looked at Li Qianxue crying like this and felt very sad. If possible, she didn't want to see Li Qianxue like this at all. She raised her hand and gently wiped Li Qianxue's tears. Mom, don't always say sorry. You didn't let me down. Li Qianxue shook her head. She wanted to say that she had let Su Qingsang down for many things. It couldn't be said in a few words. However, Su Qingsang didn't give her a chance. She wiped the tears that had flowed out again very gently. Really? You didn't do me wrong. You know that I've been living a good life. It would have been better if she hadn't said that. Now that she said it, it was like stabbing Li Qianxue's heart with a knife. How can it be good? How is it good? You're my daughter. But I haven't taken care of you for a single day. When Li Qianxue said that, she almost cried again. Su Qingsang was scalded by her tears. Mom, please don't do this. If you act like this, we won't be able to talk properly. Seeing that Li Qianxue was still in a daze, she looked at Old Master Li and the others. Li Qianxue finally came to her senses. She hastily wiped the tears off her face and looked at Su Qingsang. Look at me. Mom is really confused. Li Qianxue held Su Qingsang's hand and walked to Old Master Li. She couldn't hide the sobs in her voice. This is Qingsang. Qingsang is your granddaughter. Li Qianxue couldn't go on. Su Qingsang hurriedly said, Grandpa. She called him very softly. She had always called Old Master Li Old Master, since she was a child. Grandpa belonged to Su Yusin and Su Peijian. Hey. Old Master Li's eyes were also wet. He reached out to touch Su Qingsang's cheek, but then lowered his hand. It's good that you're back. It's good that you're back. Yusin. Su Qingsang looked at Su Yusin. Although she didn't know how Li Qianxue knew, but she also guessed that it probably had something to do with Su Yusin. Sister. Su Yusin looked at her and took a step forward. Now you are really my sister. My biological sister. Yes. Su Qingsang also wanted to cry, but she held it back. On this side, the family was reunited, and it was harmonious. On the other side, Su Qinghui seemed to be forgotten. He stood aside in a daze, and no one paid attention to him. Hua Jinyao watched Su Qingsang acknowledge Li Qianxue and Old Master Li. He let out a long sigh of relief. In fact, it didn't matter to him whether Su Qingsang acknowledged Li Qianxue or not. But he knew that it was different for Su Qingsang. If she didn't know about her past, if she was really just Xiang Saiping's daughter, perhaps she could always be like this and pretend that she didn't know anything. She could be filial to Xiang Kaiping like an ordinary daughter. She could peacefully follow Xiang Kaiping and keep the mother-daughter relationship for the rest of her life. But Su Qingsang knew, if she didn't acknowledge Li Qianxue, on the surface, she might be able to pretend that she didn't care about anything. She could convince herself not to acknowledge Li Qianxue, but in the end, there would still be regrets. It was good that things were like this. Li Qianxue calmed down and kept holding Su Qingsang's hand. Only then did Su Qingsang realize that something seemed to be wrong. She lowered her head and saw the marks on Li Qianxue's palm. "Mom, it's nothing." Li Qianxue was about to take her hand back when Su Yusen said, "I thought you went to Rong City on the way here. I was anxious and cut my hand." "Don't talk nonsense." Li Qianxue glared at Su Yusen. When she turned to face Su Qingsang, her face was a little cautious. "It's nothing. Mom was careless. It has nothing to do with you." Su Qingsang bit her lip and looked at the wound that was no longer bleeding. In her memory, Li Qianxue had always been elegant and calm. It was probably the first time in her life that she had cut her palm like this. "Mom, you actually don't have to do this. Rong City is not far from Lin City. I will still come back." "You will come back?" "Yes." Su Qingsang nodded. "It was originally planned that I would go back with Hua Jinyao for the holiday. Although she would settle down in Rong City in the future, at this time, she really didn't need to tell Li Qianxue the truth." "That means you will still come back to acknowledge me, right?" "I will come back to see you." Su Qingsang looked at the expectation in her eyes. "I will come back to see you, but if you don't know, I won't acknowledge you. I hope you can be happy." People who were ignorant were always happier. After all, they wouldn't know what happened. Because of her words, Li Qianxue wanted to cry again. She held Su Qingsang's hand tightly and refused to let go. "I will only be happy if I acknowledge you. Qingsang, promise me don't go, okay? Stay with me?" Su Qingsang's eyes showed a moment of hesitation. She turned her face to look at Hua Jinyao. They had clearly come to an agreement. They were going back to Rong City together. She didn't go back with him because of Xiang Kaiping. Now something like this had happened. Hua Jinyao was different from her. As the eldest grandson of the Hua family, he had his responsibilities on his shoulders. If she didn't go back with him, she was afraid. "Mom, I'm afraid I can't," Su Qingsang said with difficulty. "I promised Hua Jinyao that I would go back with him for the holiday. We didn't go back during the Spring Festival. Now I won't go back during the Lantern Festival. This can't be explained." She had never been a willful person. Naturally, she wanted to take care of everyone. You still want to go?" Li Qianxue was anxious. I just acknowledged you. I haven't talked to you properly, It doesn't matter." The first person to speak was Hua Jinyao. "Qingsang, since your mother wants you to stay, you can stay. Just stay with her for a while." "But I'll go back to Rong City by myself tomorrow." Hua Jinyao winked at her. "Don't worry, I'll arrange everything." Su Qingsang understood what he meant almost instantly. He said that he would arrange everything, which naturally included Xiang Kaiping. Yes, how could she forget Xiang Kaiping? "Hua Jinyao." Su Qingsang looked anxious. Just like she didn't want to hurt Li Qianxue, she didn't want to hurt Xiang Kaiping either. She knew that she shouldn't do this, but Li Qianxue was innocent. Wasn't Xiang Kaiping innocent too? "Don't think about it." Hua Jinyao took a few steps forward and stood beside her. He gently placed his hands on her shoulders. "Grandpa is a very open-minded person. He will understand you." He increased the strength of his hands and gave her a look. There was a meaning that only Su Qingsang understood. Su Qingsang's lips moved. "But your mother?" "My mother will understand too." Hua Jinyao looked into her eyes as he spoke. Even if her health hasn't been good recently, an obstetrician like you can't help. Why don't I ask someone to see her? But you can relax and stay with mom for a few days. As for my mother, I will naturally ask someone to take good care of her. If she asks, I will tell her that you went to the exchange program. Okay. Hua Jingyao thought of everything. Su Qingseng couldn't find the words to say. Then you. I'll leave tomorrow. The day after tomorrow, I can spend the holiday with Grandpa and the others. As for you, you should stay here for a few days. Su Qingseng's lips were pressed into a straight line. Li Qianxue grabbed her hand at the right time. Look, Hua Jingyao also agreed. Don't go yet. Okay. Su Qingseng didn't object in the end. In fact, deep down she also wanted to stay. Old Master Li and Su Yusin breathed a sigh of relief at the same time. They had just recognized Su Qingseng. If she left immediately, it would really be. It was good that Su Qingseng didn't leave. It was good that she didn't leave. Su Yusin also breathed a sigh of relief. He was going to school a long time ago. However, because of Su Qingseng, he hadn't reported to school until now. Li Qianxue only felt that she had 1,000 things to say to Su Qingseng. But when it really came to this, she couldn't say a word. Fortunately, Su Qingseng didn't know what to say either. The mother and daughter had almost no communication for so many years, and they couldn't even find a topic for a while. But there was no need to say anything. For Li Qianxue, as long as she saw Su Qingseng by her side, she would be very happy. Soon, it was evening after this afternoon's commotion. A servant came to say that dinner was ready. There was such a big commotion in the main room just now, but dinner still had to be eaten. Chapter 438. The more Li Qianxue felt guilty and blamed herself for Su Qingseng, the more she hated Su Qinghui. Why are you still here? Get out. You're not welcome in this house now. Su Qinghui stood there without moving. Just now, Su Qingseng and Li Qianxue only cared about getting together. Both Old Master Li and Su Yusin were paying attention to Su Qingseng. No one was paying attention to him. Now that he was reprimanded by Li Qianxue, everyone looked at him. Needless to say, Old Master Li's eyes were full of hatred, just like Li Qianxue's. Although Su Yusin couldn't bear it, he also felt that Su Qinghui had gone too far. He didn't want to talk to him for the time being. Hua Jingyao had been focusing on Su Qingseng, so he couldn't feel any sympathy for Su Qinghui. Su Qingseng finally saw Su Qinghui. In fact, she had been hugged by Li Qianxue as soon as she entered the door. After that, she had no chance to pay attention to her surroundings at all. Now that she saw Su Qinghui, she suddenly felt a little sorry for him. He didn't look like the general manager of Li Group at all. His face was still swollen from Li Qianxue's slap. Old Master Li hit him on the shoulder twice. Although it couldn't be seen, the erection on his shoulders made his shoulders droop. He exuded a dispirited aura. If Li Qianxue had seen Su Qinghui like this in the past, she would have rushed over to him. Right now, her emotions did not fluctuate. There was only indifference, and hatred in her eyes. Get out. Li Qianxue hated Su Qinghui to the core. You're not welcome here. Get lost. Su Qinghui looked at Li Qianxue. In his impression, even when she was angry, she was still arrogant. No matter how much she hated him, she couldn't hide the love in her eyes. But now in her eyes, he could not find the slightest bit of love, only hatred. She hated him. This realization made Su Qinghui very sad. His lips moved, and he looked at Li Qianxue. He had a lot to say, but at this moment he couldn't say a word. Qianxue. Get out. Li Qianxue pointed at the door. Su Qinghui, if you don't want to lose face, get out yourself. Otherwise I will have to call the police. The determined look on her face told Su Qinghui that she was telling the truth. If he didn't leave, she might call the police. Su Qinghui closed his eyes. Once upon a time, they were a famous model couple in the business circle. But now, they could only hate each other. Qianxue. He couldn't divorce her. I told you to get lost. Li Qianxue couldn't hide her agitation. She pointed at the door with hatred. Looking at Su Qinghui's face, Su Qingseng felt sorry for him. She didn't know what else to say to Su Qinghui. Mom. I'm hungry. As a bystander, she couldn't forgive Su Qinghui either. His actions had hurt two women. However, Su Qingsang felt that she couldn't just watch Li Qianxue embarrass him again and again in front of his children. He could only change the topic so that Li Qianxue would stop scolding Su Qinghui. Are you hungry? Let's hurry up and eat. As expected, Li Qianxue's attention was immediately diverted. He didn't even look at Su Qinghui. Old Master Li looked at her a few more times because of what she had done. Although this granddaughter of his had never been raised by Li Qianxue, she had a good nature. At a time like this, she could still think of Su Qinghui and use such a method to help him out. Hua Jinyao didn't miss Old Master Li's gaze. He looked at Su Qingsang with a more gentle gaze. Other people didn't know, but he knew it the best. His Qingsang was the kindest. Even though Su Qinghui had done many things to Su Qingsang, she couldn't ignore Su Qinghui's current situation. Let's go. Li Qianxue held Su Qingsang's hand and refused to let go. She led her to the dining room. Looking at the dishes on the table, she found that the servants in the kitchen had made their favorite dishes. Her face suddenly turned cold. Why didn't you make some of Mrs.'s favorite dishes? The servants and the chef looked at each other. There was such a big commotion in the living room, and they couldn't go over to watch. They didn't know what had happened. Hearing Li Qianxue say that out of the blue, they were a little confused. Isn't Miss in the United States? A very low voice sounded. Li Qianxue almost lost her temper again. Su Qingsang quickly pulled her back. Mom, don't be like this. You'll scare people. They don't know. After Li Qianxue lost her temper, she realized that she seemed to have done something wrong. She shouldn't have asked. She turned her face to look at Su Qingsang. What do you usually like to eat? Only now did she realize that she didn't even know what Su Qingsang liked to eat. This made her voice sound even more guilty and remorseful. Mom, it's okay. You really don't have to do this. She said it casually, but Li Qianxue only felt sad. Her daughter was supposed to be pampered and brought up, but now she was like a weed. She felt more and more guilty, and pulled Su Qingsang to sit next to her. Qingsang, what do you like to eat? Just tell me. I'll ask them to make it for you next time. Okay. At this time, Su Qingsang didn't want to disappoint her, so she nodded faintly and didn't object. Old Master Li and Su Yusin both sat down. Su Qinghui didn't follow in. He was smart. If he really dared to come in, Li Qianxue could guarantee that she would definitely drive him out. Hua Jinyao sat next to Su Qingsang and watched Li Qianxue put food into Su Qingsang's bowl. It wasn't just her. Old Master Li and Su Yusin actually had a lot to say. However, they all knew that Li Qianxue was excited at this time. Compared to her, they were restrained. It wasn't the first time Su Qingsang had eaten with Li Qianxue and the others, but it was the first time she participated as Li Qianxue's daughter. This feeling was very subtle. After a while, her bowl was piled up with food that she couldn't finish. Li Qianxue really wanted to make up for it. She couldn't wait to make up for the blank time in the past between the two of them, even though she knew that such a gap couldn't be made up for in 1 or 2 days. Su Qingsang could understand her feelings. So even though she felt that Li Qianxue's enthusiasm was a little overwhelming, she still smiled and accepted her goodwill. Su Qingsang couldn't eat anymore after she was 70% full, mainly because Old Master Li and Li Qianxue were too exaggerated. Su Qingsang really couldn't stand their enthusiasm. I'm really full. She looked at Hua Jinyao for help. Hua Jinyao was about to help her out when her phone rang at this time. She was stunned for a moment. When she met several pairs of eyes that were looking at her, she took out her phone with great discomfort. Chapter 439. When Hua Jinyao took Su Qingsang away, he only said that he was going to ask when they could fly. But now it was time for dinner. But they were still here and hadn't gone back. Xiang Kaiping waited in Hua Jinyao's villa for a long time, but they didn't come back. She was a little worried. Looking at the number on the phone, Su Qingsang was stunned for a moment. She suddenly felt a little conflicted. At this time, she subconsciously looked at Hua Jinyao. Li Qianxue was sitting next to her, and saw the name on the phone at a glance. It was a very simple word. Only one word, Mom. Li Qianxue's heart skipped a beat. She seemed to have just remembered that Su Qingsang had regarded Xiang Kaiping as her mother. Her hand trembled a little, and she almost couldn't control herself from grabbing Su Qingsang's phone. Su Qingsang was very embarrassed. She also knew that Li Qianxue had seen it. But the phone kept ringing. Looking at Old Master Li and Su Yusin, she had to answer the phone. Li Qianxue was next to her. She really didn't have the courage to call her mother. Hua Jingyao glanced at her and took her phone from her palm. He glanced at the others, stood up, and walked to the side to answer the phone. Su Qingsang felt as if a stone in her heart had been lifted at this moment. She let out a long sigh of relief. When she turned her head, she met Li Qianxue's eyes full of pain. Her heart trembled, and she could hardly keep her face calm anymore. The inexplicable feeling of guilt made it impossible for her to meet Li Qianxue's gaze. On the other end, Hua Jingyao glanced over and listened to Xiang Saiping's concerned voice on the other side of the phone. Qingsang, why haven't you come back for dinner yet? Xiang Kaiping had been accompanied by her daughter and son-in-law. Suddenly, he had to eat dinner alone. It was really lonely. We have something to do here. Mom, you eat first. We'll come back when we're done. Okay. Then drive carefully. Be careful when you come back at night. It's still cold. Don't catch a cold. Okay. Hua Jingyao said a few more words in a very soft voice. He hung up. He returned to his seat and returned the phone to Su Qingsang. Li Qianxue watched Su Qingsang take the phone. The phone had been hung up, but she was still sitting there in a daze. Su Qingsang was a little embarrassed, especially when 3 pairs of eyes were staring at her. It didn't feel good at all. She wanted to say something, but words were too weak at this time. Li Qianxue's body was very stiff. She sat there and kept staring at Su Qingsang. Su Qingsang felt very uncomfortable under Li Qianxue's stare. She almost wanted to get up and slip away. But Li Qianxue suddenly stood up and pulled her up. Let's go. Follow me. Mom. Where to? Let's go. Let's go talk to her. Su Qingsang paused for a moment, then understood what Li Qianxue meant. She subconsciously wanted to pull her hand out. Li Qianxue suddenly turned around and looked at her. You called her mother? Su Qingsang's lips moved, but she had nothing to say. Did you call her mom? Su Qingsang couldn't answer. If Xiang Kaiping was really a bad person or a real mistress, she could happily accept Li Qianxue. Li Qianxue was innocent, and so was Xiang Kaiping. You didn't call her mom? Li Qianxue was obsessed with this point, and stubbornly wanted an answer. Su Qingsang couldn't answer, but Su Yusin couldn't stand it anymore. He stepped forward and stood in front of Li Qianxue. Mom, what are you doing? Sister didn't know before. But she knows now. She knows now. Li Qianxue closed her eyes. It couldn't be like this. It couldn't be like this. She suddenly turned around and looked at Su Qingsang. You didn't tell her, did you? You didn't plan to tell her at all, did you? Su Qingsang didn't know what to say. She wanted to admit that Li Qianxue's heart was true. She didn't want to hurt Xiang Saiping's heart, and that was also true. At this moment, she seemed to understand Su Qinghui's feelings a little. She was in a dilemma. You didn't tell her? You want to be her daughter? You still want to be her daughter, don't you? Don't you? Li Qianxue almost broke down. She couldn't accept this fact. How could this be? Her daughter, she has always ignored, always ignored. She finally wanted to be with her daughter. But she had already decided to have another mother. Then why did you come back? Why did you come back? Li Qianxue felt hurt. She put her hand over her heart and felt terrible. Why did you come back? Why did you come back? Su Qingsang took a step forward and wanted to say something. But it seemed that it was not appropriate to say anything at this time. Old Master Li looked at the chaos in front of him. His body swayed, but he managed to stabilize himself. Su Yusin wanted to say something, but he didn't know where to start. Li Qianxue was still sad. Su Qingsang looked helpless. At this moment, Hua Jingyao suddenly took a step forward. He stood next to Su Qingsang and put his hands on her shoulders. Mrs. Su, are you blaming Qingsang now? As soon as he spoke, everyone's eyes fell on him. Hearing Hua Jingyao call her Mrs. Su, Li Qianxue only felt uncomfortable. I am her mother. I am. But that's because you don't know how they met. You don't know how good Xiang Kaiping is to Qingsang. These people in front of her were all insiders. But Hua Jingyao was not. He wrapped Su Qingsang's body in his arms, using this posture to declare his attitude. Su Qingsang felt the heat from his body, and her heart seemed to calm down a lot. Hua Jinyao patted her shoulder and looked at Li Qianxue. Xiang Kaiping met Qingsang for the first time in Rong City. Hua Jinyao's words were very simple, and he explained the situation in a few words. When Su Qingsang was in Rong City, she was on the news. Later, Xiang Kaiping saw her on TV and found that she looked very similar to Su Qinghui. After knowing that her name was Qingsang, she decided to come to find her. I have investigated everything about Xiang Kaiping. I know that she gave birth to a child the day after Christmas that year. I also know that the child was later taken away by Su Qinghui. Qingsang wanted to do a paternity test, but Su Qinghui came to find her. With him we are more certain. Mrs. Su, when you are blaming Qingsang, I also want to tell you something. What Miss Xiang Kaiping has done for Qingsang. More than 20 years ago, Xiang Kaiping did abandon her daughter. However, when he thought that Su Qingsang was his daughter, everything he did was motherly. The sweater that Qingsang is wearing now was knitted by her. She got into an argument with Su Peijian to buy a gift for Qingsang and was almost hit by a car. Xiang Kaiping is still in a wheelchair. Hua Jinyao looked at Li Qianshue's calm expression, and his voice softened a little. Before the new year, Qingsang knew that she was not Xiang Kaiping's child. Qingsang was type AB, but Xiang Kaiping was type O. Qingsang knew, but because she did not want to hurt Xiang Kaiping, she chose to keep her mouth shut. At that time, Qingsang also wanted to question Su Qinghui, but he refused to say. Later, when she found out that her mother was you, she wanted to come to the Su family to see you immediately. But you went to the United States. You heard it clearly. She wanted to see you immediately, but you were not there. She wanted to see you on an impulse. You were not in Lin City, but you gave her time to calm down. You are innocent. What about Xiang Kaiping? You flew to the United States for Xiang Kaiping's daughter, afraid that she would be lonely in a foreign land. But have you ever thought about it? For the past 20 years, Qingsang has been alone. Who has ever pitied her when she was lonely? Hua Jinyao's voice was not accusatory. He was just calmly pointing out the truth. But such a truth was even harder to accept than accusation. Li Qianshue's body went limp, and she could barely stand. She collapsed on the dining chair. Only Xiang Kaiping. It was because of her that Qingsang had motherly love. Xiang Kaiping did not know that Qingsang was not her child, and she treated Qingsang with sincerity. If Qingsang could not wait to meet you as soon as she knew who she was, completely disregarding Xiang Kaiping's feelings. Would you want a daughter like that? Would you want to meet her? Li Qianshue's face was pale, and she could not say a word. Not only her, but Su Yusin and Old Master Li also lowered their heads. Yes, Su Qingsang was the legitimate daughter of the Su family. It would only be good for her to meet them. There was no harm. But even under such circumstances, Su Qingsang did not want to meet them immediately. She had concerns in her heart. Such concerns were for someone who was actually unrelated to her, but had given her motherly love. Mrs. Su, please forgive me for not being very nice right now, but I still want to say that you are unhappy because Qingsang called Xiang Kaiping mom for a few months. Then for the past 20 years, Su Peijian has always called you mom. Putting yourself in her shoes, isn't Qingsang more qualified than you to be unhappy? Li Qianxue could not say a word. She just sat there in a daze. Su Yusin stood next to her. Looking at his mother like this, he could not comfort her even if he wanted to. Su Qingsang could not help but glare at Hua Jinyao. She knew that he was eloquent. But wasn't it too much to say that to Li Qianxue? Hua Jinyao raised his eyebrows. He did not do it on purpose. If he had to blame someone, he could only blame Su Qinghui. Li Qianxue suddenly leaned on the table and cried herself hoarse. Her heartache, which had already eased, came out uncontrollably again. Su Qingsang's nose began to sting again. She took a few steps forward and squatted down beside Li Qianxue. She reached out and gently held her hand on her knee. Mom, don't cry. These things. It's not your fault. I have never blamed you. Her eyes were exceptionally clear. Chapter 440. She's really nice to me. For the past few months, She has been accompanying me and taking care of me. So, can you not be angry? If possible, Su Qingseng really didn't want to hurt Xiang Kaiping. Don't worry. I will definitely make it clear to her. But really, please give me some time. Li Qianxue stopped crying. She did not move from her position on the table. Seeing this, Su Qingseng's emotions were quite complicated. If only she had known about her past a little earlier. Then she wouldn't have so many concerns. Mom! Su Yusen stepped forward and patted Li Qianxue's shoulder. Just listen to your sister. Old Master Li, who had been silent the whole time, let out a long sigh. Qianxue, Qingseng didn't do anything wrong this time. You should calm down too. If they were in each other's shoes, Su Qingseng had only called Xiang Kaiping mom for a few months, and Li Qianxue couldn't stand it. Su Peixian had been calling Li Qianxue mother for more than 20 years. What would Xiang Kaiping do? Li Qianxue knew all of this. But knowing was one thing, and accepting was another. She looked up at Su Qingseng with tears in her eyes. Yes, you are not wrong. I'm the one at fault. It was always me. If she hadn't forced a relationship that didn't belong to her, if she hadn't seen through Su Qinghui's viciousness, she wouldn't have been separated from her daughter for so many years. Mom! Su Qingseng didn't like the atmosphere. She hugged Li Qianxue and gently patted her back. Don't say any more. You're not wrong either. None of us did anything wrong. That was right. None of them had done anything wrong. Su Qinghui had always been in the wrong. Su Qinghui hadn't left. He stood in the living room, not knowing where else he could go, or what else he could do. This was his home. Even if he didn't like it in the beginning, no matter how much he didn't accept it. After more than 20 years, he had gotten used to this family. If Li Qianxue wanted to drive him away, he had a place to go. He just didn't want to leave. It wasn't until he heard the commotion coming from the dining room that he slowly and steadily walked into the dining room like an old man. He didn't go in. He stood at the door and listened to Hua Jinyao and Li Qianxue's conversation. Su Qingseng said that Li Qianxue was not in the wrong. Then it could only be him. Su Qinghui looked as if he had suffered a great blow. Without hesitation, he left the place. He walked quickly. It was as if someone was chasing after him. Except for Hua Jinyao. Almost no one noticed that Su Qinghui had appeared and disappeared at the door of the restaurant. Hua Jinyao narrowed his eyes as he watched Su Qinghui leave. Li Qianxue's emotions finally calmed down. She held Su Qingseng's hand and followed her out of the restaurant. The mother and daughter sat down on the sofa. Li Qianxue had a lot to ask Su Qingseng and a lot to tell her. Su Qingseng knew that she was agitated and couldn't be calmed down in a short time. He wanted to change the topic, but he felt that the current mood was not suitable. She pulled out a tissue from the side and wiped Li Qianxue's tears. Mom, look at you. His eyes were red. Don't cry next time. All right. I won't cry. Li Qianxue wanted to cry again because of her words. However, he did his best to restrain himself. She held Su Qingseng's hand and looked at her daughter. How careless was she? Although Su Qingseng looked like Su Qinghui, the shape of her face was clearly the same as hers. She looked like Su Yusen. She actually didn't think in that direction even once. She was really a careless mother. Old Master Li looked at the mother and daughter in front of him and glanced at Hua Jinyao out of the corner of his eye. Speaking of which, he had some regrets before. Hua Jinyao was such an outstanding young man, but he didn't marry his own granddaughter. Now that regret was gone. Hua Jinyao married Su Qingseng, but Su Qingseng was his own granddaughter. Old Master Li was not in a hurry to talk to Su Qingseng, but he did have something to say to Hua Jinyao. Jinyao, I heard that you were going back to Rong City? Yes. Hua Jinyao nodded. Qingseng and I have been married for so long, but we haven't been there yet. The headquarters of Tianyu Group was originally in Rong City, but now, I'm afraid Qianxue won't be willing to let Qingseng go. It wasn't easy for them to reconcile. Judging from Li Qianxue's current attitude, there was no way she would let Su Qingseng go to Rong City. Li Qianxue seemed to confirm Old Master Li's words. She grabbed Su Qingseng's hand tightly and said, I won't allow you to go, even if it's convenient for me to fly to Rong City. But that was someone else's house. I don't want you to go. Mom. Su Qingseng felt a little awkward. He turned to look at Hu Jingyao. Mom, what do you think? Hu Jingyao followed Su Qingsang's advice and called her mother. I'll go back to Rong City for the next few days to take care of some things. As for Qingsang, he would stay at home for the time being. Anyway, she just quit her job in the hospital, so it's fine if she doesn't go. That's good. He happened to be at home with me. Su Qingsang looked at Li Qianxue. At this time, she couldn't say no. She couldn't help but look at Hu Jingyao. She found that she seemed to be used to this action. When she didn't know what to do, Hu Jingyao could always give her strength and calm her down. Qingsang, you can stay here today. Then, I'll go home later. Hu Jingyao knew very well that Li Qianxue wouldn't let Su Qingsang go back today. But Xiang Kaiping was still waiting. She wasn't stupid. Why didn't Su Qingsang go back? Li Qianxue's lips moved. She wanted to say that she didn't need to worry about Xiang Kaiping, but she couldn't say it. In order to divert her attention, Su Qingsang changed the topic. Oh right, Mom, how did you know about this? She did a paternity test, and Su Qinghui admitted it himself. But Su Qinghui would never tell Li Qianxue. Yusin told me. Thinking of this, Li Qianxue still felt a lingering fear. If Su Yusin hadn't heard the conversation between Hu Jingyao and Su Qinghui, Su Qingsang didn't want to acknowledge her. When they went to Rong City, he would never know that Su Qingsang was actually his daughter for the rest of his life. She didn't even dare to think about it now. How did Yusin know? Su Qingsang was really curious. Su Yusin didn't hide it. He glanced at Hu Jingyao and told him how he knew about this. Su Qingsang didn't say anything else. Looking at it this way, everything. It was really God's will. She didn't want to acknowledge Li Qianxue, but she still found out. Qingsang, you're back with me now. I don't care what you thought before. I really won't let you leave me again. Li Qianxue felt very insecure now. She needed some assurance, some certainty. Su Qingsang nodded gently. Mom, don't worry. I won't leave you. Even if she went to Rong City, she could come back to see her often. Hearing her promise, Li Qianxue's expression relaxed a little. For a moment, she was a little touched and reached out to hug Su Qingsang tightly. Hu Jingyao didn't stay for long. He played a game of chess with old Master Li. He got up and said goodbye. Su Qingsang took the opportunity to send him off and followed him out. Hu Jingyao. Su Qingsang didn't regret acknowledging Li Qianxue. Especially when she saw Li Qianxue like that, she couldn't bear it. However, she still felt uneasy. In fact, if she talked to Xiang Kaiping nicely, it probably wouldn't be a big problem. But just now, everyone had forgotten that there was another person involved in this incident. Su Peijian. Hu Jingyao. As Su Qingsang spoke, she wrapped her arms around Hu Jingyao's waist. Tell me, am I wrong? If she hadn't been persistent in seeking an answer, if she hadn't secretly gone to do a paternity test, Li Qianxue wouldn't have known until now. You're not wrong. Don't think too much. But, I already said you're not wrong. Don't think about it. How could she not think about it? Su Qingsang looked at Hu Jingyao, and then at the door behind them. She lowered her head and said softly, there's something I didn't mention just now, but it doesn't mean that it didn't happen. What? Su Peijian. Su Qingsang's expression was very complicated. I'm back. What about Su Peijian? Hu Jingyao frowned. She's not under your control, right? It's not a matter of whether I care or not. Su Qingsang sighed in her heart. I've only been with Auntie for a few months, and we already have such a deep relationship. Su Peijian has been with my mother for more than 20 years. Their relationship must be deeper than ours. You don't like her? You don't want to see her? After all, Su Qingsang and Su Peijian didn't get along. No. Su Qingsang looked at Hu Jingyao. I'm not the kind of person who can't tolerate others. I'm also not the kind of person who has a chicken belly. But Su Peijian is different from me. I'm afraid that when the time comes, she won't be able to accept this fact. She broke my mother's heart. Li Qianxue was so angry now. She even kicked Su Qinghui out. When that time came, she was afraid that she would vent her anger on her. Although Su Peijian had a spoiled personality, in this matter, she was considered innocent. If Li Qianxue really vented her anger on her, Xiang Jingqing suddenly flicked her forehead. He looked at her with a helpless look in his eyes. All right. Don't think about it. These things are not your business, and it's not something you should worry about. According to what I said, let your mother worry about these things. It's really not your turn to think about these things. But, even if Su Peijian doesn't accept it, she will make trouble for you. Don't you still have me? Hua Jinyao pinched her cheek. I won't watch my wife be bullied. Moreover, it wasn't easy for Li Qianxue to recognize Su Qingseng. How could she allow others to bully her? Even if that person was Su Peijian. What are you thinking? I'm not worried about her bullying me. I'm worried about my mother. Li Qianxue and Su Peijian had been mother and daughter for more than 20 years. Would she really not fall out with Su Peijian because she knew the reason? Chapter 441. That's enough. You don't have to worry about her. As for making your mother happy, it's a very simple thing. You stay and accompany her. She'll be very happy. Hua Jinyao's words made Su Qingseng fall silent. That was the reason, but she still couldn't accept it in her heart. Hua Jinyao. She suddenly took a step closer to him and reached out to hold his hand. Do you think Grandpa won't be unhappy if I don't go back with you? Old Master Hua was a very good person. Su Qingseng didn't want to make him unhappy. Of course not. Don't worry. I'm here. He would definitely be unhappy. After getting married, not only did he not bring her back for the new year, but now he didn't even go back for the festival. Moreover, they had agreed on it before. Now Lu Tongjia and Hua Mingguang would probably be unhappy. Su Qingseng couldn't completely relax, but Hua Jinyao's repeated promises made her less worried. Hua Jinyao looked at her and couldn't help but rub the top of her head again. You're still a doctor. You're so worried. All right. I'm here for everything. Okay. Su Qingseng nodded heavily. Well, remember to tell her when you go back. They all knew who she was. Hua Jinyao resisted the urge to flick her again. Oh you, can you not worry about these things? Su Qingseng didn't say anything. She just thought a little too much. Don't worry. I'll leave the story for you to tell. Today, I'll say that there's a problem with a patient in the hospital. I need you to keep an eye on him. Is that okay? Su Qingseng wasn't sure if Xiang Kaiping would believe her. However, this excuse was the best way to go about it. Thank you, Hua Jinyao. Hua Jinyao leaned over and kissed her on the lips. It's okay. I'll keep the gift for later. Su Qingseng blushed. Being disturbed by Hua Jinyao like that seemed to have dissipated all of a sudden. After sending Hua Jinyao off, Su Qingseng turned around and walked back, only to find that Li Qianxue had been standing at the door, looking at her from afar. After seeing her turn around, she looked embarrassed and at ease. Su Qingseng had never seen Li Qianxue like that. Feeling a little sour, his footsteps quickened. Mom, it's windy outside. What are you doing out here? I'm fine. I just want to see you. Su Qingseng's eyes were a little wet, but she suppressed that feeling. She stepped forward and hooked her arm around Li Qianxue's. Mom, you might as well look at yourself instead of me. You're much prettier than me. Li Qianxue's mood finally improved because of Su Qingseng's words. Who said that? My daughter is the prettiest. Old Master Li had been waiting in the living room. In fact, he and Su Yusin had the same worries as Li Qianxue. He was afraid that Su Qingseng would run away. Now that she had not left, Old Master Li's Su Yusin breathed a sigh of relief. Li Qianxue was actually very tired. It had been a long-distance flight of more than 10 hours, and after getting off the plane, he had experienced such an emotional roller coaster. She was tired and sleepy, but she could not bear to go to sleep. After exchanging a few words with her, Su Qingseng noticed that Li Qianxue was exhausted. She couldn't bear it. Mom, go rest. I promise I'll still be here when you wake up. Then you sleep with me tonight. Li Qianxue grabbed her hand. Just sleep with Mom, okay? Su Qingseng couldn't refuse, so she finally nodded. Okay. Li Qianxue was satisfied, thinking that she hadn't come back to stay before. She called the servants and asked them to go upstairs and change all the bedsheets. Old Master Li was old and couldn't afford to be tossed around. Indeed, Su Qingseng went upstairs to rest after not leaving. The mother and daughter went upstairs. Su Qingseng had a room here before, so naturally, there were clothes there. When Li Qianxue went to take a shower, Su Qingsang went back to her room to find her clothes. The servants cleaned regularly, so the things in the room were still there. Su Qingsang looked at all of this and actually felt a little emotional. She picked out a set of pajamas and returned to Li Qinshua's room. She had already taken a shower, and it seemed that she had taken a quick shower. It was as if she was afraid that she would run away. Li Qinshua's lack of security made Su Qingsang feel helpless. She took her pajamas and was about to go into the bathroom. Just like her, she wanted to get it done quickly. Li Qinshua's phone rang at this moment. The two of them looked at each other. Li Qinshuo glanced at the screen, and her expression suddenly changed. Su Qingsang also saw it. It was Su Peijian's call. Li Qinshuo didn't answer the phone. Previously, she was completely immersed in the matter of recognizing her daughter. Now that she had calmed down, she also thought of Su Peijian. It was a fact that Su Peijian wasn't her daughter. But no matter how much she hated Su Qinghui, she had raised Su Peijian for more than 20 years. If she was asked to treat Su Peijian coldly, she couldn't do it. But if she was asked to pretend that nothing had happened and continue to be Su Peijian's mother and daughter, she couldn't do it. Li Qinshuo looked at the number now and hated Su Qinghui even more. Mom, you'd better answer it. Su Qingsang actually sympathized with Su Peijian. She didn't dare to think about how Su Peijian would react if she knew. Li Qinshuo looked at her, picked up the phone and picked up. Mom. When Su Peijian returned to her apartment, Su Yusin told Li Qinshuo to ask Su Qinghui if he agreed to let her come back. But now, so much time had passed. She didn't receive a call from Su Yusin or Li Qinshuo. Su Peijian had been alone in the United States. Even though Li Qinshuo had hired someone to take care of her, she had had enough. Now that she had returned to her apartment, even though she had returned to China, she was still alone. What was the difference between this and letting her stay abroad? After the nanny made dinner for her that night, she had been waiting for Li Qinshuo's call. After waiting for a while, he called Li Qinshuo. What did Dad say? Does he agree to let me come back? Li Qinshuo did not say anything. In fact, at this point, she really didn't know how to get along with Su Peijian. Li Qinshuo didn't even want to respond to her calling her mom. Mom, did Dad disagree? Su Peijian's voice was suddenly full of sadness. Dad, why are you like this? It's been so long, and you still haven't calmed down. Li Qinshuo didn't want to listen anymore. She suddenly remembered why Su Qinghui had sent Su Peijian away. If not for Su Peijian, Xiang Kaiping would not have been injured. Su Qingsang would not have pity for Xiang Kaiping. Your dad hasn't calmed down yet. You should stay here for a while. When he calms down, naturally, he will let you come back. Li Qinshuo's voice was a little cold. Su Peijian was stunned. Mom, that's it. I'm tired today. I want to rest first. Mom. Su Peijian's voice was a little worried. Did you quarrel with Dad? Don't quarrel with Dad. If he doesn't want me to come back, I won't come back. Don't quarrel with Dad because of me. Her parents didn't have a good relationship to begin with. If they quarreled every 3 days, there would be a big quarrel every 5 days. Their relationship would probably become even worse. If that woman Xiang Kaiping provoked again, perhaps Su Qinghui's heart would be even more biased toward her. Because of Su Peijian's words, Li Qinshuo couldn't continue to harden her heart. Su Qingsang had a mother-daughter relationship with Xiang Kaiping. How could Su Peijian not have feelings for her? I know. You should rest. I'm tired too. I'll sleep first. She was afraid that she would expose herself. Li Qinshuo quickly hung up the phone. When she turned to face Su Qingsang, she felt uncomfortable again. Qingsang, will you be angry? Why would I be angry? Your sister Su Peijian. Su Qingsang and Su Peijian's identities had been swapped. Su Qingsang was no longer Su Peijian's sister. Instead, she was her sister. After all, she has been by my side for more than 20 years. She wanted to tell her Su Peijian's background directly. However, she couldn't say it out loud. Mom, I know everything. Don't explain. Feelings weren't born. They were born together. Su Qingsang knew this very well. I'm going to take a shower. Mom, you sleep first. When Su Qingsang came out of the bathroom, only a small bedside lamp was left in the room. Li Qinshuo's eyes were closed, as if she had fallen asleep. She walked to the bed quietly. Su Qingsang lay down very gently, as if she was not afraid of waking her up. Unexpectedly, Li Qianxue wasn't in a deep sleep at all. As soon as she heard her movements, she woke up and opened her eyes to look at her. Are you done? Mom. Go to sleep. Su Qingsang looked at her and really felt sorry for her. I'm here. I won't run away. Li Qianxue blinked. I know you won't run away. I will. She was just a little worried. Su Qingsang held her hand. Then I'll hold your hand to sleep tonight? Okay. Li Qianxue held her hand tightly. She held it a little tightly, but Su Qingsang didn't break free. Qingsang. Li Qianxue looked at her. She couldn't get enough of her. She was clearly very sleepy, but she still wanted to say a few more words to her. It's been hard on you in the past few years. It's not hard. Su Qingsang shook her head. Mom, don't think like that. I should have treated you better. Li Qianxue really regretted it. I really should have treated you better. If that was the case, she wouldn't be as regretful, self-blaming, and upset as she was now. Her heart ached when she thought of the missed time. Mom, don't think like that. I'm really good. How could she be good? Li Qianxue thought about how Su Qingsang had been at home before she was 18. Can you tell me about you? Anything is fine. Su Qingsang was a little embarrassed. She really didn't know what to say. Just tell me why you became a doctor. Why did Su Qingsang become a doctor? Because she couldn't understand why there would be women who didn't want their children. Therefore, she chose to become an obstetrician and gynecologist. She wanted to meet more pregnant women. She wanted to know what these mothers were thinking. But she couldn't say this to Li Qianxue. If she said it, she would feel bad again. Mom, I'll tell you something about me in medical school. We first learned theory in our freshman year. Then, Su Qingsang skipped the question just now and didn't answer. But Li Qianxue could keenly sense that she must be hiding something. If she didn't want to say it, she wouldn't ask. However, she still felt a little regretful. Her daughter wasn't close to her now. If she wanted Su Qingsang to completely believe and accept her, it wouldn't be a matter of a day or two. Su Qingsang's voice was very pleasant. At least, Li Qianxue was fascinated by it. She listened to her talk about the interesting things about going to college, and how she felt when she took her first anatomy class. Those lost times were becoming clear bit by bit through this way. Li Qianxue was really too sleepy. After forcing herself to listen for more than half an hour, she finally fell asleep. After Li Qianxue fell asleep, Su Qingsang could finally take a breather. In fact, she was also tired. Looking at Li Qianxue, she gently moved her body closer to her. This feeling was quite wonderful. It was completely different from the feeling when she slept with Hu Jinyao. Hu Jinyao gave her security, peace of mind, and a thick warmth. But Li Qianxue gave her a different feeling. She couldn't tell, but this feeling was wonderful. Li Qianxue had a faint fragrance on her body. Her body was very soft and warm. Su Qingsang carefully moved her face closer to Su Qingsang's shoulder. She felt the temperature of Li Qianxue's body. This was the warmth that belonged to a mother. Su Qingsang closed her eyes, curled up the corners of her lips, and slowly fell asleep. Li Qianxue was extremely tired yesterday, but she woke up early in the morning. The excitement of the first day was too great. She had a dream that night. From the first time she met Su Qinghui to giving birth to his child. And then there was everything that happened yesterday. She dreamed that she couldn't make Su Qingsang stay. She still got on the plane to Rong City. No matter how she called, Su Qingsang refused to look back. She was scared awake by that dream. When she opened her eyes, she saw Su Qingsang sleeping next to her. Her daughter's steady breathing and rosy cheeks from a night's sleep were reminding her that she was just dreaming. As long as it was a dream, Li Qianxue's hands and feet were still a little weak. She looked at Su Qingsang's side profile. Looking at her like this, she could feel that her facial features were more similar to her. This was her daughter. Her biological daughter. Her real daughter. She looked at Su Qingsang's face leaning against her shoulder, and her hand was still holding hers. She felt like a little baby snuggling up to her parents. She had been sleeping in separate rooms with Su Qinghui for a long time. When she went to the United States, she also shared a room with Su Peijian. It had been a long, long time since she had slept in the same bed with someone. She couldn't help but raise her hand and pinch Su Qingsang's cheek. The warm touch reminded her that Su Qingsang was real. It wasn't a dream. Her daughter was now sleeping in the same bed with her. Hua Jinyao, stop it. Su Qingsang was disturbed by her movements. She thought that Hua Jinyao was beside her, so she muttered. She didn't wake up. Instead, she frowned and fell asleep again. Li Qianxue was stunned by her words. She seemed to have just remembered that Su Qingsang was already married. Hua Jinyao. Li Qianxue had never liked him before. All the things he did to protect Su Qingsang made her feel a little uncomfortable. Chapter 442. Although she had to be grateful to Hua Jinyao for all the things that had happened before, at least when she didn't know, he protected Su Qingsang again and again. These actions made her feel uncomfortable at the time, and she was grateful now. However, no matter how grateful she was, she couldn't hide the fact that Hua Jinyao and Su Qingsang's marriage was too casual. She didn't know it before, but now she knew. She was quite dissatisfied. Hua Jinyao had married her daughter so casually. Now he was taking Su Qingsang back to Rong City to develop. She didn't have enough love for her daughter. How could she let Hua Jinyao take her to Rong City so easily? No matter what, she should make things difficult for him, shouldn't she? There was a knock on the door, and Su Yusun's voice sounded outside. Mom, are you up? It's time for dinner. Coming. Li Qianxue quickly got up and quietly walked to the door to open it. I'll come down later. Don't disturb your sister. Let her sleep a little longer. Mom, could it be that you guys didn't sleep the whole night because of the candlelight talk? Su Yusun didn't want to be the bad guy. However, Old Master Li woke up early. Li Qianxue had been with Su Qingsang for the whole night, but Old Master Li hadn't woken up yet. Old Master Li also missed his granddaughter. If he didn't know before, it would have been fine. Now that he knew, he wanted to make up for the past 20 years. Let your sister sleep. Li Qianxue didn't want to wake her daughter up so early. They talked until late last night. Mom, I'm awake. Su Qingsang woke up while they were talking and sat up. She blinked sleepily. Her long hair was a little messy, and she habitually rubbed her eyes, looking like she wasn't fully awake. Li Qianxue's heart softened. She turned to look at her. Why don't you sleep a little longer? It's all Yusun's fault for waking you up. It's okay. I usually get up early. Su Qingsang was completely awake now. Mom, if you're sleepy, you can sleep a little longer. I'm not sleepy. Li Qianxue was also sleepy. She wanted to spend more time with her daughter. So how could she be sleepy? Su Yusun looked at the two of them, shook his head, and turned to go downstairs. Soon Li Qianxue and Su Qingsang came downstairs. Su Qingsang was wearing the clothes that Li Qianxue had bought for her. That was originally prepared for Su Peijian. Now that Su Qingsang put it on, standing next to Li Qianxue, they looked like a pair of sisters. Su Yusun stood up. Old Master Li looked at the two people in front of him. He didn't find it strange at all. It was as if Su Qingsang was supposed to be in this house. Let's go and have breakfast first. The group moved to the dining room, and Old Master Li sat down. Li Qianxue and Su Qingsang sat on either side of him. Su Yusun sat on the other side of Su Qingsang. Breakfast was sumptuous. Yesterday, the servants at home had been instructed to prepare the dishes according to Su Qingsang's preferences. However, after so many years, he still didn't know what Su Qingsang liked to eat. He simply made a big table. Qingsang, what do you want to eat? Li Qianxue was there again. This time, she wanted to give all her motherly love to Su Qingsang. Mom, I'm really not a picky eater. Su Qingsang was afraid of her. If you do this, I won't dare to eat at home anymore. Then. Mom, it's fine as usual. Su Qingsang's words made Li Qianxue feel more at ease. The more Old Master Li looked at Su Qingsang, the more he liked her. She was not arrogant, not willful, and had a sense of propriety. She also knew when to advance and when to retreat. Qianxue, I want to hold a banquet. Halfway through the meal, Old Master Li suddenly put down his chopsticks. He looked at the other three people. We didn't know before, but now that we know, we naturally have to restore Su Qingsang's original identity. That's good. Li Qianxue fully supported it. Invite all the people in the business circle of Lin City. I want them to know who the young lady of the Su family is. There's no need for that, is there? Su Qingsang looked at the two people and looked a little uncomfortable. It's fine as it is now. There's no need for a banquet, right? Of course there is. And it's a big one. Old Master Li wanted to tell the world. I want to clear your name, and I've prepared a gift for you. Grandpa. Su Qingsang couldn't sit still anymore. She put down the chopsticks in her hand. Grandpa, Mom, I thank you. I understand how you feel. But there's one thing I have to say. She lowered her eyes and looked a little embarrassed. I'm very grateful that you're willing to acknowledge me, but I think we can forget about the banquet. My father. No matter what, he's still my father. It was indeed his fault for doing this back then. But now that the mistake has been made, the situation is already like this. Then we can only face it. If you acknowledge me with great fanfare, I'll become the young lady of the Su family. Then, what about Su Peijian? As soon as the name Su Peijian came out, the other three people were silent. Even if Su Peijian wasn't Li Qianshua's daughter. But for more than 20 years, she had grown up under their love. This matter was Su Qinghui's fault, and it had nothing to do with Su Peijian. But if old Master Li acknowledged her with great fanfare, what would Su Qinghui do? Mom, I'm not soft-hearted, and I'm not a saint. It's enough for our own family to know about this. Most importantly for Su Qinghui. No matter what, Su Qinghui was her father. He was her biological father. Although she also felt that what Su Qinghui had done was too much. But blood ties couldn't be cut. She couldn't destroy Su Qinghui just because Su Qinghui had replaced her and changed her identity. If people knew that Su Qinghui had planned such a vicious plot many years ago, how could Su Qinghui gain a foothold in Lin City in the future? Now old Master Li wanted to kick him out, and Li Qianxue wanted to divorce him. Su Yusin blamed Su Qinghui, and Xiang Kaiping hated him. When Su Peijian found out, she would probably blame Su Qinghui. Su Qinghui, who had been betrayed by his family, would have to face the strange eyes of those people in Lin City. Su Qingsang couldn't bear to think about it. What happened had already happened. There was no point in looking into it again. She didn't want to ruin the last bit of Su Qinghui's reputation. After his divorce with Li Qianxue, his reputation would be affected. That could be considered a punishment, right? But Li Qianxue looked at Su Qingsang's face and only felt anxious. But if that's the case, it's too unfair for you. It's not unfair. Su Qingsang blinked. Mom, if you really think I'm unfair, then be nice to me in the future. Li Qianxue didn't speak. She felt sad. This was her daughter. She couldn't even tell others that this was her daughter. Then, even if you don't want us to hold a banquet, at least let me ask our family to come over for a meal. Let's get to know each other. Su Qingsang couldn't refuse this request. She nodded. Okay. Then it's just a meal. There's no need to pick a time. Let's do it tomorrow. Old Master Li waved his hand. Tomorrow is not the Lantern Festival. Let them come together for the festival and get to know each other. Su Qingsang didn't object this time. She couldn't object. Mom, if our relatives and friends come over tomorrow, we can just say that we gave birth to a child in the same hospital that was accidentally switched. Su Yusin suddenly spoke, which made Su Qingsang look at him. She had forgotten before that there could be such a story. However, she quickly realized that those who could survive in the business world of Lin City were all shrewd people. Even if this story was tenable for a while, unless Li Qianxue could maintain the original husband and wife relationship with Su Qinghui. Otherwise, Li Qianxue would insist on divorcing Su Qinghui as soon as she found out that the baby had been switched. No matter how she looked at it, this matter seemed to be a conspiracy. Humph. Old Master Li was angry when he talked about this matter. We have to say this, and they have to be willing to believe it. Whether they believe it or not is their business, whether they say it or not is our business. No matter what, we can still show our attitude. Like Su Qingsang, Su Yusin didn't want Su Qinghui to end up too badly. No matter what, he was still their father. Li Qianshue's face was cold, and she didn't speak. She was not only disappointed in Su Qinghui now, there was resentment, hatred, pain, and regret. After dinner, I will contact Lawyer Chen. Li Qianxue looked at Su Yusin as she spoke. Yusin, you are not 18 yet, but you will be soon. Qingseng is already an adult, and your future life has nothing to do with your father. I want to divorce him. Old Master Li had no objection. Don't give him a cent of the company's shares. I want him to leave the family with nothing. Dad, this kind of thing goes without saying. I said it. I will give him what he wants. No matter what, he has worked hard for the Li Group to make a lot of money for the past 20 years. When Li Qianxue said this, there was obvious hatred in her eyes. Just think of it as spending money to buy out the past with him. Qianxue, that's it. Li Qianxue thought for a moment. I will call Lawyer Chen over later. Ask him to send the divorce agreement over today. Su Yusin and Su Qingseng looked at each other. They both knew that they were powerless to stop this matter. Mom. Su Qingseng's lips moved. She wanted to say something, but Li Qianxue seemed to be able to understand her thoughts. Qingseng, you don't have to persuade me about this matter. I have already decided. I have been let down by him all my life. I used to think that if I treated him well, he would understand it forever. Now it seems that it is impossible. Since you know that you are my daughter, you should know how vicious his intentions are. He wants to give the Li Group in the end. Li Qianxue couldn't continue. Anyway, don't persuade me. Su Qingseng nodded, and didn't say anything else that would make Li Qianxue unhappy. Okay, I support you. Su Yusin was on the side, unable to stop his parents from divorcing. He could only be glad that they were all grown up now. Su Qingseng didn't expect Li Qianxue to act so quickly. Not long after dinner, she called Lawyer Chen over. Chapter 443. Mr. Chen was the exclusive lawyer of the Li Group. He never thought that one day he would receive such a request from his employer. GM Li, are you serious? Of course. Li Qianxue looked determined. If it wasn't because she had already gone through a night's buffer, she wouldn't have been able to remain so calm. Su Qinghui had been married to her for so many years, and he had a lot of property under his name. Those were his property to begin with, so Li Qianxue wouldn't care about them. As for the share that originally belonged to the Li Group, she could also give it to Su Qinghui, depending on the situation. Su Qinghui had 10% of the company's shares, which had originally belonged to him. Although Li Qianxue was angry, she did not intend to take back the shares. But there was one thing. Su Qinghui has no right to sell or transfer the shares of the Li Group. If you want to transfer or sell it, you can only sell it to Li Qianxue or the Su siblings. Li Qianxue didn't want Su Qinghui to give so many shares to Su Peijian in the future. She had raised Su Peijian for more than 20 years. In the future, she would give her the treatment she deserved. However, Su Peijian could forget about Li Group's shares. It had never belonged to her in the first place, and it would never be hers in the future. The rest was just a small problem. Li Qianxue was very detailed. Su Qingseng listened on the side, and felt that although Su Qinghui had divorced Li Qianxue, as long as he didn't make too much trouble in the future, he wouldn't have a bad life. She looked up at Li Qianxue. Even though Su Qinghui had done so many outrageous things, he was afraid that Li Qianxue still had feelings for him. Li Qianxue didn't care about her daughter's emotions. After saying all that she could give to Su Qinghui, Li Qianxue added, I'll send it to him today. When the Civil Affairs Bureau starts working tomorrow, I'll go and settle the paperwork. She couldn't wait any longer. All right. Lawyer Chen was in a difficult position, but he still stood up and put away his notebook. Where is General Manager Su now? Just call him. Li Qianxue didn't care about Su Qinghui anymore. For her, Su Qinghui had become a person who had nothing to do with her. Whether he lived or died had nothing to do with her. When Lawyer Chen walked out, Hua Jinyao happened to come over. Hua Jinyao, why are you here? Su Qingseng stood up and walked to his side. She thought he had returned to Rong City today. Our flight is in the afternoon, Hua Jinyao said, glancing at Su Qingseng with a meaningful look. Afternoon? What time is it? Around 3 o'clock. Hua Jinyao thought of the lie he told Xiang Kaiping yesterday. Xiang Kaiping didn't suspect anything yesterday, but she was a little worried when she didn't see Su Qingseng this morning. She kept asking Hua Jinyao why Su Qingseng wasn't back yet. I don't think you can hide it anymore. Hua Jinyao's voice was very soft. I'll try to get her on the plane this afternoon, but I can't guarantee that I'll be able to fool her. After all, Xiang Kaiping had been working hard in the outside world for so many years. She had good judgment. Unless you follow me back to Rong City, I'm afraid you won't be able to hide it. Su Qingsang looked a little conflicted. She turned around and saw that Li Qianxue and Su Yusin were standing behind them, obviously listening to her plan. You go back first. Su Qingsang thought about it for a long time and gave such an answer. Send her back to my apartment first, then let Xiao Yu and Xiao Ning stay to take care of her. Then I'll go over and explain to her tonight. Are you sure? Yes. Su Qingsang thought about it. No matter how good she was, she couldn't hide it forever. Li Qianxue was always careful when facing her, which made her feel bad. After thinking about it, she could only make it clear to Xiang Kaiping. Since she was destined to let one side down, she had to make a choice. Hua Jinyao clearly saw that Li Qianxue and Su Yusin were behind Su Qingsang. They were relieved because of her words. Do you need me to go with you? Hua Jinyao was still a little worried. No need. Su Qingsang shook her head. You've wasted enough time because of me. Go back to Rong City in the afternoon. Say hello to Grandpa for me. And say sorry to him that I can't go to celebrate the festival with him. Don't worry. I said it. Grandpa won't blame you. Hua Jinyao rubbed the top of her head affectionately. Su Qingsang wasn't sure if old Master Hua really wouldn't blame her. But at the moment, she really wanted to deal with these things in Lin City before she could go to Rong City. Hua Jinyao didn't leave until after lunch at the Su family. Before he left, he called Yang Wenchang and asked him to make arrangements for Xiang Kaiping. He went directly to the airport. Su Qingsang said she would drive him, but he refused. Hua Jinyao asked her to tell Xiang Kaiping that she and Su Peijian had been switched. Watching Hua Jinyao leave, Su Qingsang suddenly felt more like a student. How could it be so easy to tell Xiang Kaiping that she and Su Peijian had been switched? If Xiang Kaiping found out, she was afraid that she would go crazy. At a time like this, Su Qinghui should be the one to talk. However, Su Qinghui probably wasn't in the mood to face Xiang Kaiping now. Su Qinghui sat in the office for the whole night. He didn't sleep, nor did he rest. After leaving the Su family yesterday, Su Qinghui suddenly found that he had nowhere to go. Of course, he had more than one house in Lin City, but those houses were cold and lifeless. He stayed there for the whole night, sitting in a daze. He didn't know where he could go. He didn't know who he could ask for help. There were so many names in his phone's contact list, but at this time, no one could help him, because none of them could solve his problem. His phone rang. Su Qinghui suddenly seemed to come back to his senses and picked it up. He thought it would be Li Qianxue or anyone else in the Su family. But on the other end of the phone it was Lawyer Chen. Lawyer Chen asked him where he was. After learning that he was in the company, he asked him to wait for a few minutes and said that he would be there soon. Su Qinghui hung up the phone, looking a little confused. He didn't know why the lawyer was here. A possibility flashed through his mind. However, Su Qinghui refused to think about that possibility, refused to face it. But no matter how much he refused, what would come would still come. Lawyer Chen entered the door, sat down opposite him, and took out a divorce agreement from his bag. General Manager Su, I'm sorry. I was wronged by Mr. Li. I came to give you the divorce agreement. Do you want to take a look? Divorce agreement? Su Qinghui felt as if his heart had been punched so hard that he couldn't straighten his back. Chapter 444. Su Qinghui stared blankly at the divorce agreement. He didn't even look at its contents. He raised his head slightly and looked at Lawyer Chen. She asked you to send it over? Mr. Chen was the lawyer of the Li Group. He had a good relationship with Li Qianxue and Su Qinghui. Meeting Su Qinghui's eyes, he felt very uncomfortable. Yes. Just send this over? Su Qinghui didn't even look at the agreement. He stared at Lawyer Chen and insisted on an answer. President Li said that if it's possible, General Manager Su, please sign it as soon as possible, because she wants to get the paperwork done quickly. Her words undoubtedly stabbed Su Qinghui in the heart again. He closed his eyes, unwilling to face this fact, even if he already knew it. I won't sign it. President Su this. I won't sign it. If you want me to sign, let her talk to me herself. Lawyer Chen looked troubled. Mr. Su, please don't make things difficult for me. I'm not trying to make things difficult for you. I'm just telling you. If she wants me to sign, I won't sign it unless she comes herself. Su Qinghui didn't know what he was obsessed with, but he knew very well that he didn't want to let it go like this. He couldn't just let it go like this. Lawyer Chen looked at Su Qinghui. He had no idea how things had turned out this way. In fact, as a lawyer of the Li Group, he knew more than the average person. Su Qinghui and Li Qianxue were not as harmonious as they appeared on the surface. But no matter how bad their relationship was, the two of them had been together for more than 20 years. Speaking of which, the two of them were both good to the outside world and the inside world. Their teamwork was pretty good. How many rich couples had deep feelings for each other? But he didn't expect that after a year. He didn't know how it ended up like this. Sighing, Lawyer Chen also knew that there was no room for negotiation. After all, Li Qianxue's attitude yesterday was so firm. President Su, I'll leave the document here. I think you should take a look at it first before deciding whether to sign it or not. Su Qinghui didn't say anything. Lawyer Chen left the documents behind and left. Su Qinghui was the only one left in the office. He sat there for a long time without moving. When Su Qingsang parked the car in front of her apartment, she looked a little hesitant. Before she went out, Li Qianxue looked reluctant. He even wanted to follow her. But she rejected him. If Li Qianxue was here, things would get even more complicated. Li Qianxue finally let her go after she repeatedly promised that she would go home, after she made it clear to Xiang Kaiping. Sitting in the car, Su Qingsang suddenly didn't dare to face Xiang Kaiping. She had known about it for a long time, but she had never told Xiang Kaiping. I wonder if she will blame me? Su Qingsang didn't know. After sitting in the car in a daze for a few minutes, she finally opened the door. When she got out of the car, there was a car parked right behind her. She stared blankly at the familiar license plate. When Su Qinghui got out of the car, Su Qingsang's eyes widened. Dad, why is he here? She was so surprised that she even forgot to close the car door. She stared blankly as Su Qinghui walked toward her step by step. When she got closer, she found that Su Qinghui looked very haggard. His chin was full of scum, and his eyes were bloodshot. Dad. Su Qinghui stood there and looked at Su Qingsang. This was his daughter. He closed his eyes, and his voice was a little weak. Why are you here? Su Qingsang thought for a moment and decided to tell the truth. I came to explain to Auntie about my identity. Hearing that, Su Qinghui couldn't help but look at her again. You're going to explain? Su Qingsang thought to herself. If she didn't explain, should she let Su Qinghui explain? Dad, why are you here? I'll explain to her. Su Qinghui's voice sounded a little tired. He sat in his office for a long time. He found that he had done many things wrong. In the past, he could still find excuses and reasons for himself. But now, he couldn't even find an excuse for himself. He thought that what was wrong. Since it was already wrong, he would find a way to make up for it. The first thing was to get everything back on track. Su Qingsang widened her eyes and looked at Su Qinghui in disbelief. Was he serious? Go back. I'll go upstairs and talk to her. Su Qingsang stood there and thought for a moment. She shook her head and said, No need. I'll go with you. After all, she had been with Xiang Kaiping for a few months. If Xiang Kaiping was really annoyed or angry later, she might be able to talk to her. Xiang Kaiping didn't expect to see Su Qingsang and Su Qinghui at the same time. In fact, when Su Qingsang didn't come back yesterday, and Hu Jinyao sent her back to her apartment this morning, she had a vague feeling that something was wrong. She thought about calling Su Qingsang. However, Hu Jinyao said that she had something to do, so she wanted to wait for her. However, she didn't expect to see Su Qingsang and Su Qinghui at the same time. That surprised her a little. She wanted to drive Su Qinghui out, but she gave up when she saw Su Qingsang. Su Qingsang saw Xiang Kaiping with mixed feelings and called her mother softly. Qingsang, you're back? Has the matter at the hospital been resolved? Ah, yes. Su Qingsang nodded. looked at Xiao Yu and Xiao Ning, and said, "Are the dishes ready for dinner?" Xiao Yu and Xiao Ning, "Why don't you go buy some vegetables?" Xiao Yu and Xiao Ning looked at each other, and stood up at the same time. "Okay, let's go now." The two of them left. The living room suddenly became quiet. Su Qinghui, who had been standing at the door, took a step inside. "Qingseng, didn't you say that you were going to Rong City for the festival? You're back so late today. Are you still going to Rong City?" "I'm not in a hurry, but I'm afraid that Hua Jinyao's family will have a problem with you. I have something to do at the moment, so I can't go." When Su Qingseng saw the concern in Xiang Saiping's eyes, she couldn't say a word. "Let me say it." Su Qinghui walked to Xiang Kaiping in 2 steps. When he saw the disgust in her eyes, his heart didn't fluctuate at all. "What do you want to say?" Xiang Kaiping stared at Su Qinghui warily. "Make it short." She was annoyed and didn't want to see Su Qinghui, which made Su Qingseng a little uncomfortable. She glanced at Su Qinghui and said, "Dad, sit down and talk. I'll go to the kitchen and get you some water." She turned into the kitchen and poured 2 glasses of water. When she came out, Su Qinghui had already sat down on the sofa opposite Xiang Kaiping. "Kaiping, what I'm going to say next might make you angry, or you might hate me, but I want you to calm down and listen to me. Since you know that I'll be angry after hearing it, then don't say it." Xiang Kaiping said coldly, her face full of mockery. Su Qinghui didn't care. Seeing Su Qingseng walk to him, he took the glass from her hand. The warm water calmed him down. He stared at the glass in his hand, not looking at Xiang Kaiping. 25 years ago, you gave birth to our child in the hospital. At that time, you were still angry with me. So you threw the child to me and asked me to take care of it." Su Qinghui's voice was calm, as if he was talking about someone else's business. Xiang Kaiping instinctively felt that something bad was going to happen. She gripped the armrest of the wheelchair tightly and stared at Su Qinghui warily. "What are you trying to say?" Su Qingseng closed her eyes, as if she had gone back to more than 20 years ago, back to the days when she was obsessed with him. "In order to take revenge on Li Qianxue, I took her child, and our child. Later, I couldn't bear it, so I took the child back." But Xiang Kaiping widened her eyes and looked at Su Qinghui in disbelief. He kept his head down and stared at the glass of water in front of him. "That's what happened. I took your and Li Qianxue's child. Su Qingseng is Li Qianxue's daughter. Su Peixian is our child." Su Qingseng already knew that, but hearing Su Qinghui say it out loud, she still felt quite complicated. She looked at Xiang Kaiping with a worried face, worried that she couldn't take it. Xiang Kaiping sat there in a daze. She didn't speak, nor did she move. If she made a fuss, Su Qingseng could still think of a way to comfort her. But Xiang Kaiping was like this, and she didn't even know how to comfort her. The word mother went through her heart, but she didn't say it out loud. She handed the glass of water to Xiang Kaiping, trying to comfort her in this way. Xiang Kaiping looked at the glass of water, then looked at Su Qingseng's face. "You already knew, didn't you?" Su Qingseng met Xiang Saiping's eyes and didn't know what to say. Xiang Kaiping suddenly grabbed her wrist. Su Qingseng was caught off guard, and some water spilled out of her hand. No one had time to care about that. Xiang Kaiping stared at her face and said word by word, "You already knew, didn't you?" "Yes." Su Qingseng nodded. "I knew before the Lunar New Year." "You knew before the Lunar New Year." Xiang Kaiping tightened her grip and looked at Su Qingseng. Her tone was colder than before. "You knew before the Lunar New Year?" Su Qingseng couldn't bear to see her agitated face, but she had to say what she wanted to say. "That time you were injured and hospitalized. I knew. You were type O, but I was type AB." She didn't say the rest, but Xiang Kaiping understood what she meant. At that time, Su Qingseng knew that Xiang Kaiping wasn't her daughter. "You didn't tell me? Why didn't you tell me?" Xiang Saiping's voice was several degrees higher than before. She stared at Su Qingseng, unable to believe that she wasn't her daughter. How could this be? How could this be? Su Qingseng couldn't say it out loud. "I'm sorry. At that time, I only knew that I wasn't your child. But I didn't know whose child I was. I used to think that I was born from my father and a woman outside. Chapter 445. There was still some time before Su Qingseng found out that she was not Xiang Saiping's daughter. How could Xiang Kaiping accept this news so easily? She looked at Su Qingseng and felt that she had been betrayed by the whole world. Su Qinghui had betrayed her, and now Su Qingseng had betrayed her as well. Xiang Kaiping couldn't accept it. She stared at Su Qingseng's hand and insisted on an answer. Why didn't you tell me? Tell me. Tell me. Su Qingseng looked at Xiang Saiping's hand. Her voice was very soft. I'm sorry. I actually wanted to tell you, but you were injured at that time, and you couldn't take the stimulation. Another reason was that I didn't know whose daughter I was. I don't know where your daughter is. I asked my dad, but he wouldn't tell me. I kept guessing, but I couldn't figure it out. Later on, I felt that it didn't matter whose daughter I was. Why don't I recognize you? It's good that we can depend on each other like this from now on. During that time, Su Qingseng really regarded Xiang Kaiping as her mother. She really wanted to spend the rest of her life with Xiang Kaiping. Mom! In fact, it was obviously not appropriate to call her mom at this time. But Su Qingseng couldn't change the way she addressed her. She squatted down in front of Xiang Kaiping to look her in the eye. I'm sorry. I really didn't know before. I'm really grateful to you from the bottom of my heart, and I really see you as my mother. Xiang Kaiping looked at Su Qingseng. There was a ball of fire in her heart. That ball of fire kept burning in her heart, giving her the urge to burn everything down. Then how do you know now? Didn't you say he wouldn't tell you? As she spoke, she glared at Su Qinghui. That gaze seemed to be able to pierce through him. Su Qingseng suddenly fell silent. She didn't know what to say. In fact, Hua Jinyao guessed it, so she went to do a paternity test. Now that things had come to this, it was meaningless to talk about how they discovered it. The damage was done. I told her. Su Qinghui's voice sounded a little abrupt. He looked at Xiang Kaiping, not avoiding her gaze. Kaiping. I said it. These things were also done by me. Don't look at Qingseng. In fact, she never wanted to hurt you. You can see it from her decision to go to Rong City with you. She has really decided to live with you. Kaiping, I know this may be hard for you, but that was the truth. Qingseng is not your daughter. Peixian is. Sorry. Xiang Kaiping finally let go of Su Qingseng's hand and turned to face Su Qinghui. His sharp gaze was filled with monstrous hatred. After I come back, you'll know that I've acknowledged Qingseng, right? Xiang Saiping's voice was sharp, and her tone was rather blunt. You came to me again and again, just to tell me this? Yes. Su Qinghui nodded and faced Saiping's anger. You had many opportunities to tell me, but you didn't tell me even once, right? Yes. Su Qinghui didn't deny it. At that time, I couldn't open my mouth at first, but later, it became more and more difficult for me to say it. For revenge, you gave my daughter to the woman I hate the most to raise. Right? Su Qinghui closed his eyes. He couldn't argue. He had nothing to say. Xiang Kaiping suddenly reached out, snatched the cup from Su Qingseng's hand, and threw it in Su Qinghui's direction. Su Qinghui didn't dodge. The cup hit his chest heavily, then fell to the ground and shattered. Su Qingseng wanted to stop him, but it was too late. Seeing Su Qinghui hit the cup, the water inside spilled out, soaking most of his clothes. For some reason she couldn't bear it. Her lips moved, wanting to say something, but she couldn't say a word. Su Qinghui, why don't you go to hell? Xiang Kaiping was really angry. Her chest rose and fell violently, and the expression on her face was no longer as calm as before. It was ferocious and angry. Why did you give my child to someone else to raise? Why did you change my child's life? What did you tell me when you took my daughter away? You said that you would take good care of your daughter. And you said that you would give her the best. So this is what you meant by the best of everything. Su Qinghui couldn't refute that. Under those circumstances, he had indeed decided to give the Li group to Su Peixian. That was the best he could give her. Su Qinghui, what right do you have to make decisions for my daughter? Xiang Kaiping was really angry and angry. She was angry, hurt, and regretful. This feeling was even more regretful than when she found out that Su Qinghui ignored Su Qingseng and didn't take good care of her daughter. Do you think that I will thank you for turning my daughter into the Su family's young miss? Do you think I will forgive you because you made my daughter the granddaughter of the Lee family? In your dreams. Let me tell you I won't. I won't forgive you. You made my daughter recognize the woman I hate the most as her mother. Do you think you are doing this for her good? Do you think you are doing this for her good by giving her property and money? Su Qinghui, you don't understand love at all. You don't understand anything at all. Let me tell you, don't think I will forgive you. Impossible. Xiang Kaiping pointed at Su Qinghui. She was so angry that she couldn't face him calmly. I won't. Su Qinghui. I won't be grateful to you. I won't forgive you. I will only hate you. Su Qinghui's face was pale. He looked even more haggard than before. Kaiping. Kaiping, I really did it on impulse. I already regret it. I also know that you will blame me and hate me. But I really did it for the sake of our daughter. For the sake of our daughter? Why don't you say that you did it for yourself? Xiang Kaiping unceremoniously exposed his lie. You just wanted to take revenge on Li Qianxue. But you couldn't find a way. You couldn't deal with her, so you came up with such a vicious idea. You didn't do it to give your daughter everything you think is best, as you said. You just wanted to satisfy your own ridiculous desire for revenge. Xiang Kaiping said all this in one breath. In the end, she felt as if all the energy in her body had been sucked out. She lowered her head and glanced at the broken pieces on the floor. There were many voices in her heart, many words. In the end, they all turned into one sentence. Su Qinghui, I am really disappointed in you. She still remembered the young man from before. He was high-spirited and full of ambition. He said that he wanted to make a lot of money and give her a good life. At that time, she was innocent and naive, and she believed his words. Or did it go wrong? That young man grew up and became a successful businessman. After her outburst, Xiang Kaiping was left with only a blank look. She hated not only Su Qinghui, but also herself at this time. She shouldn't have come back, and she shouldn't have appeared. She shouldn't have come to claim her daughter. That way, she wouldn't have known that Su Qinghui had swapped her daughter. She wouldn't have known that Su Qinghui had become such a person. That way, she would still be able to keep a beautiful image in her heart, imagining that her daughter was living a happy life, not like this. Yes, even if Su Peijian became the eldest daughter of the Su family, Xiang Kaiping wouldn't be happy. Su Qinghui had been criticized by Xiang Kaiping so many times. But it didn't hurt as much as this sentence. Xiang Kaiping was disappointed in him. He knew that what he had done was indeed very disappointing. But now, the person who was disappointed was Xiang Kaiping. Ever since he was young, he had treated her like his own sister. She was like a close relative to him. Now she said that she was disappointed in him. Su Qinghui didn't know what else he could say. He just sat there in a daze and didn't move. Go. Xiang Kaiping closed her eyes and didn't look at Su Qinghui. She turned her face away, not wanting to look at Su Qinghui anymore. Su Qinghui sat there motionlessly, looking at Xiang Kaiping with a complicated look in his eyes. Get out. Xiang Kaiping pointed in the direction of the door. Get out of here. I don't want to see you. Seeing that Su Qinghui was still standing there, she suddenly got angry. She couldn't care less about her waist that had just recovered. She stood up and quickly rushed to Su Qinghui to pull his arm. Get out. Get out of here. If you don't leave, I won't be polite. I won't be polite to you. Su Qinghui was pulled to his feet by her. Looking at Xiang Kaiping, who was full of anger and had completely lost her cool, he stood up. Kaiping, I'm sorry. Get out. Xiang Kaiping pulled his arm and pushed him out of the door. Kaiping, get out. Xiang Kaiping became agitated again because of his presence. Seeing this, Su Qingsang took 2 steps forward. Dad, you should leave first. Xiang Kaiping was so agitated at this moment. It was obviously not a good time to talk. Su Qinghui looked at Su Qingsang. He didn't just feel sorry for Li Qianxue, Xiang Kaiping and Su Qingsang. Qingsang, you should leave. Su Qingsang gave him a look. Hurry up. His presence here would only make things worse. Su Qinghui actually knew this. He took a step back, looked at Xiang Kaiping, and then looked at Su Qingsang. Qingsang, I'm sorry. This was what he owed Su Qingsang. He wouldn't run away because of this. Su Qingsang was stunned for a moment. She was very surprised to hear this word from her father's mouth. Xiang Kaiping glanced at Su Qingsang and wanted to tell her to leave too. But at this moment, she suddenly remembered that this was Su Qingsang's home. This realization made her angry. She snorted and pushed Su Qinghui away. At the same time, she didn't forget to close the door. Turning around, she saw Su Qingsang standing there. She was looking at Su Qingsang, and Su Qingsang was also looking at her. Their eyes met. The mother and daughter, who used to be intimate, didn't say a word at this moment. Su Qingsang really didn't know what else she could say. She felt that whatever she said would be wrong, and the more she said, the more wrong it would be. Xiang Kaiping stared at her face. After spending a few months with Su Qingsang, she had a certain understanding of her. Chapter 446. You've already acknowledged her. Am I right? Xiang Kaiping looked at Su Qingsang, stubbornly demanding an answer. Su Qingsang couldn't argue back, so she chose to remain silent. Right now he was in a dilemma. He could neither advance nor retreat. You said you were going to the hospital yesterday, but you were actually going to see Li Qianxue, right? The anger on Xiang Kaiping's face became more and more obvious. Rationally, he knew that it was normal for Su Qingsang to recognize Li Qianxue. However, he found it hard to accept. She couldn't accept Su Peijian as her daughter. She almost got herself killed. She couldn't accept that Su Qingsang was Li Qianxue's daughter. Su Qingsang was obviously much better than Su Peijian. That was right. That was why she hated Su Qinghui the most. If he hadn't swapped the two children, Su Peijian would have been an illegitimate daughter. Then, Su Peijian would be like Su Qingsang, sensible, obedient, and completely in line with the daughter in her heart. Not an arrogant, willful, selfish, and mean personality. That was not how she wanted to see her daughter. Su Qinghui had ruined all of that. Destroyed. Su Qingsang looked into Xiang Kaiping's eyes and couldn't say no. Her silence was the best proof. Xiang Kaiping looked at her and nodded repeatedly. All right. That's nice. That was great. Since you've already acknowledged her, why are you still calling me mother? Huh? Why are you still calling me mom? Xiang Kaiping was very emotional. She couldn't control the anger in her heart at all, and she couldn't suppress the rolling emotions in her heart. She had only interacted with Su Peijian a few times, and she had always felt that Su Peijian was too evil. She couldn't accept that such a girl was her daughter. Looking at Su Qingsang, Xiang Kaiping felt betrayed. It was a deep betrayal. Not only had Su Qinghui betrayed her, but so had Su Qingsang. Strictly speaking, this had nothing to do with Su Qingsang, nor was it her fault. However, Xiang Kaiping couldn't help but vent her anger. The huge anger made her speak incoherently. You've already acknowledged Li Qianxue. Why are you still calling me mom? Could it be that in your heart, you want to please both sides? She nodded, looked at Su Qingsang's pale face, and said in a heavy voice, That's true. What kind of person was Li Qianxue? She was the eldest daughter of the Li family. The Li group would be hers in the future. If you acknowledge her, there will definitely be endless benefits. How can you not rush to acknowledge her? What am I? Just a pitiful one. An old woman with no power or influence. I can't give you anything. That's why you couldn't wait to find your mother, right? These words were very unpleasant to hear. Su Qingsang's face turned pale. Her lips twitched. She didn't know how things had turned out this way. Mom, don't do this. Don't call me mom. I'm not your mother. Xiang Kaiping was in so much pain that she needed to pass it on. Your mother is Li Qianxue, not me. Su Qingsang fell silent. Her expression was full of helplessness, but in Xiang Kaiping's eyes, it became her grievance. Do you feel wronged? You feel wronged? Why didn't you tell me from the beginning? Why did you wait so long to tell me? Su Qingsang, what do you mean? Tell me. Su Qingsang closed her eyes. She had nothing to say about Xiang Kaiping's accusations. I'm sorry. I don't want to hear you say you're sorry. Xiang Kaiping was also angry. Go away. Go to your mother's place. Go to your real mother's place. I don't need you here. Su Qingsang's mouth moved, but in the end, she didn't call her mother. She let out a long sigh in her heart. There were some things that she knew what the outcome would be, but when it really happened, She was the one who was powerless to change it. Just like now. She didn't want to hurt anyone. But in the end, she still hurt someone. Auntie. Su Qingsang thought about how to phrase it in her heart. There were some things that she still had to make clear. I really didn't think about this matter properly. I apologize to you. But there are some things that I still want to explain to you. When I found out that you weren't my mother, it happened to be when you were injured. If it weren't for your blood transfusion, I wouldn't have known that you weren't my mother. In fact, I really wanted to make the best of the mistake and recognize you as my mother. I was also prepared to bring you to live with me in Rong City. But my mother, Li Qianxue, is actually also a pitiful person. I don't care about the grudge between you two back then. I don't care about the relationship between her and my father, or between you and my father. But in this matter, she is innocent. Although I've acknowledged her, in my heart, I still respect you from the bottom of my heart. I know that you might have some feelings for Su Peijian before, but after so many years, whether it's old Master Li or my mother, they all treat Su Peijian with sincerity. I know that you won't forgive my father. I also know that you may not forgive me or my mother. But there is one thing that I don't want you to misunderstand. That is, my mother has truly loved Su Peijian for so many years. After saying this, Su Qingsang looked at Xiang Kaiping. Xiang Kaiping was silent and didn't respond to her. Su Qingsang was helpless. She knew that there were some things that couldn't go back. She wanted to say a few more words, but little Yu and little Yu had already returned. The two of them looked at the situation in front of them and were a little confused. Auntie, you are in a bad mood now. If you don't want to see me, I won't come in front of you to attract your attention. Little Yu, you two take good care of Auntie. Little Yu and little Yu looked at each other, and finally looked at each other. They didn't quite understand why Su Qingsang had changed the way she addressed her. However, no one spoke at this time. The two of them nodded in unison. Su Qingsang glanced at Xiang Kaiping again, and found that she still didn't look at her. She felt a little helpless, and finally turned to leave. After she left, Xiang Kaiping's body softened, and she almost fell to the ground. Little Yu and little Ning panicked, and quickly went forward to help her up. I'm fine. Don't worry about me. Xiang Kaiping waved her hand, and sat down on the sofa, gesturing for them to leave. You guys go do your own things. I want to be alone for a while. Little Yu and little Ning looked at each other, and finally went to the kitchen together. Xiang Kaiping lowered her head and covered her face with her hands. No one could see her expression at this time. However, tears fell from between her fingers. The tears fell to the ground, and splashed into small water droplets. Su Qingsang walked out of the house, still feeling suffocated. Just as she was about to go to her car, she saw Su Qinghui still standing downstairs. Seeing him, Su Qingsang really couldn't calm down. Dad, why are you still here? In this situation, she was afraid that Xiang Kaiping wouldn't want to see her. I was waiting for you. Su Qinghui looked upstairs as he spoke, then returned his gaze to Su Qingsang. Are you all right? What could be wrong with me? Su Qingsang asked. Shouldn't you be asking about Auntie now? Su Qinghui's expression was a little ugly. His lips moved. Qingsang, are you blaming me too? Is it useful for me to blame you? Su Qingsang turned her face and looked at him very seriously. If I blame you, can you ease the pain of Auntie and my mother? If you can, then I really blame you. Su Qinghui's face turned a little pale because of her words, making his already haggard face look even worse now. Su Qingsang looked at him and couldn't bear to see him like this. She closed her eyes and said very softly, Dad, some things have happened, and they have already happened. You have already done it, and you have already done it wrong. Then don't think about how uncomfortable you are, and how much you regret it. At this time, shouldn't you be thinking about how to make up for it? Make up for it. Shouldn't I? Su Qingsang didn't believe that at this time. Su Qinghui still didn't know where he was wrong. My mother raised someone else's daughter for more than 20 years for you. Is she wrong? Auntie mistakenly recognized someone else's daughter for you. Is she wrong? What you did it on impulse, but you did it. Then what about the people you hurt? Shouldn't you show your attitude and make up for those you hurt? Su Qinghui looked at this daughter in a daze. At this moment, It was as if he had met Su Qingsang for the first time. As for yourself, Su Qingsang bit her lip. This was actually not suitable for her to say, but she had to say it. Dad, do you really know who you love? Do you really know who is the most important person to you? Su Qinghui thought about her words and couldn't come back to his senses. Seeing that he still hadn't come back to his senses, Su Qingsang sighed again in her heart. Dad, I just want to ask you something. Who do you love? Do you love my mother? Or do you love Auntie? Su Qinghui stared at his daughter. At this moment he didn't know how to answer. If you love my mother, then how can you have the heart to replace her child and let her raise someone else's child for more than 20 years? If you love Auntie, how can you have the heart to let her daughter call someone else mom? When she grows up, you won't recognize her when you meet her. Su Qinghui's expression was really ugly. In this short period of time, the repeated blows had long made him lose his initial gentleness and elegance. Su Qingsang couldn't bear it, but she still had to say what should be said. You have lived for more than half of your life. Do you really not know? Or do you not want to face it? I'll put it this way. My mother wants to divorce you now. Don't you feel anything at all? Have you ever thought that one wrong move of yours will make you lose my mother forever? Su Qinghui's body felt as if it had been struck by lightning, and he suddenly took a big step back. Or do you not care at all because the person you love is Auntie? Chapter 447. After saying that, Su Qingsang turned around and got into her car without looking at him. However, Su Qingsang's mood had not completely calmed down until she got into the car. She was once a pure illegitimate daughter who didn't know her own background. That kind of background was not necessarily very glorious, but she lived a very peaceful life. But now, her identity had changed, and her calmness was gone. Tomorrow was the Lantern Festival, and old Master Li would call all the relatives of the Li family over. At that time, she would have a new situation to deal with. There was also the Hua family. She actually felt that it was inappropriate for her not to go home with Hua Jinyao this time. However, she couldn't leave at all because of the matter in Lin City. She suddenly missed the days when she was in medical school. Back then, all she had to do was go to school and do research. Everything was so pure and simple. But now, after sitting in the car for a long time and driving for a long time, he still felt uncomfortable. In the end, she took out her phone and called Hua Jinyao. Jinyao. As soon as the call was connected, Su Qingsang couldn't wait to call out Hua Jinyao's name. Yo, isn't this my elusive sister-in-law? TSK. What? Why are you looking for my brother? She didn't expect Hua Manzi to answer the phone. Where's your brother? She calculated the time. Hua Jinyao had flown to Rong City and returned to the Hua family's mansion. He had already arrived and rested for a while. As soon as I came back, I was called over by my grandfather for a lecture. Sister-in-law, do you want to know what my grandfather would say to my brother? Judging from Hua Manzi's tone, it was definitely not a good thing. Since he's busy, I'll call him after he's done. My brother won't be finished in a short time. Speaking of which, isn't it your fault? My brother marrying you is like marrying an ancestor. Not only did you refuse to follow my brother to Rong City, but you also want my brother to follow you to Lin City to further his career. Forget about all that. It's the new year, and you're his granddaughter-in-law. Why don't you show your face? Speaking of which, my uncle and auntie really have good self-restraint. If it was another family, I'm afraid he won't be so easy to talk to. Hua Manzi's words were full of sarcasm. Su Qingsang felt very uncomfortable and was about to hang up the phone. Hua Jinyao's voice came from the other end of the line. What nonsense are you talking about? Hua Jinyao went upstairs and found that he had accidentally dropped his phone on the sofa. He didn't expect Hua Manzi to pick up his call in such a short time. Hua Manzi's expression was a little ugly. She just so happened to be sitting there. Unexpectedly, Hua Jinyao caught her red-handed. Hua Jinyao took the phone and glanced at her coldly. Only then did he go upstairs. Qingsang, how can you say that you're fine? Su Qingsang was really a little nervous now. Grandpa is angry. I told you it's okay. Hua Jinyao walked to the end of the corridor on the second floor, where there was a study that belonged to him. After entering the door and isolating the noise from the outside, his voice became gentler. Don't worry. Manzi was spouting nonsense. Ignore her. He said that, but how could Su Qingsang believe him? She thought that after tomorrow, she might as well go back to Rong City. However, she was afraid that Li Qianxue would overthink again. Thinking of this, Su Qingsang felt a headache. Don't worry about Manzi. Tell me, why did you call me? Su Qingsang blinked and thought of what had happened that day. She sighed and told Hu Jinniao about it. Hu Jinniao, do you think I did something wrong? What does this have to do with you? No. In fact, Su Qingsang really couldn't get over it. I shouldn't have been so curious in the first place. If I had kept pretending that I didn't know anything, I wouldn't have been so curious. I will really treat Xiang Kaiping as my mother. Actually, there was nothing bad about it. Isn't it? It's unfair to your mother if you think like that. Hu Jinniao understood that she was being stubborn. She couldn't accept the fact that Xiang Kaiping had spoken ill of her. Have you ever thought that you could pretend that you don't know anything? What about your dad? He has made up his mind to take revenge on your mother. Have you ever thought about it? If you want to pretend for the rest of your life, what if your dad doesn't agree? By the time your mother is in her 70s or 80s, she won't have the ability anymore. Say it again. When the time comes, your mother won't know where her daughter is for the rest of her life. Worst comes to worst, she might be angered by your father, and something bad might happen to her. Hu Jinniao didn't finish his sentence, but Su Qingsang understood. There were some things that she couldn't do as she pleased. If Li Qianxue didn't know about it, she could live happily. But if the day that Hu Jinniao said really came to pass, wouldn't that be even more miserable? Thank you, Hu Jinniao. Su Qingsang finally came back to her senses. She smiled bitterly and said, I was thinking too much. I think Xiang Kaiping hasn't recovered yet. When she recovers, I think she might go to Su Peixian. As for your mother, don't think about anything else now. Just stay with her for a few days. Okay. Su Qingsang nodded and didn't object. Hu Jinniao thought for a moment and said, By the way, I've already told Cheng Xianyan. When you come, go directly to the hospital under his name. It's a private hospital. The fees are high, and the doctor's salaries are high. You won't be so tired. Su Qingsang was about to say yes, but then she remembered what Zhang Qiubai had said on the phone. But my teacher heard that I'm going to Rong City. He wrote a letter of recommendation for me. He recommended that I go to Rong City Hospital. Private hospitals were good, but there were more patients in public hospitals, and they could make better use of their skills and research. Okay, it's up to you. Hu Jinniao wouldn't interfere in Su Qingsang's affairs in this aspect. You decide. Su Qingsang nodded. Hu Jinniao never interfered in this aspect, which made her very grateful. After chatting with Hu Jinniao for a while, Su Qingsang was in a better mood. After hanging up, her body relaxed a little. Looking at the neon lights on the road in front of her, she murmured softly, Hu Jinniao, I miss you. Su Qingsang's mood was much better, but Su Qinghui's mood fell to the bottom. He staggered into his car, and Su Qingsang's words kept flashing in his mind. In fact, old Master Li had said those words to him before, but at that time, he didn't take them to heart at all. In his opinion, he had already been so successful. There was nothing to lose. He felt that everything was under his control, and he wouldn't let himself lose anything that he cared about, whether it was people or things. But now, he was full of uncertainty. Su Qingsang's words, Li Qianxue's words, and old Master Li's words. Even what Hu Jinniao had said before. Every sentence turned into a ripple that kept reverberating. Wave after wave surged towards him, almost drowning him. Many memories flashed through his mind bit by bit. From the first time he got along with Xiang Kaiping, to the chance encounter with Li Qianxue at the company. How did he get involved with Li Qianxue? Su Qinghui thought that he didn't remember. But in fact he remembered it quite clearly. That year, he had just jumped from a company to Li Corporation. Originally, his dream was to enter the world's top 500 companies. He thought about how to succeed quickly, to become a superior person. In fact, at first, he only wanted to use Li Corporation as a stepping stone. But to his surprise, he met old Master Li. Old Master Li was very resourceful in the business world back then. and his business philosophy was quite compatible with Su Qinghui's, because he met Old Master Li by chance. So he entered Li Corporation. Originally, he only wanted to use Li Corporation as a stepping stone, but because Li Corporation felt that it was a good opportunity for him to show off his abilities. At that time, Su Qinghui had an extraordinary enthusiasm and devotion to work. At the same time, his relationship with Xiang Kaiping was almost settled by his mother. Su Qinghui's family used to live next to Xiang Kaiping's family. He was 2 years older than Xiang Kaiping. At that time, both of their parents were both working, and they had no time to take care of them when they were busy. Xiang Kaiping's mother was a nurse, and she was even busier than Su Qinghui's parents. Therefore, Su Qinghui's parents would bring Xiang Kaiping over to play when they had nothing to do. Later, an accident happened. Xiang Kaiping's father passed away, and her mother became even busier. Without her parents to take care of her, Xiang Kaiping lived like an orphan. Because of this, Su Qinghui's mother would bring her over to play when she had nothing to do. She gradually became a child of Su Qinghui's family. When she had nothing to do, she would eat and do her homework at the Su family. She even had a special room in the Su family for her to rest. Su Qinghui was reminded by his parents every day to take good care of his sister. He did the same. It was not a difficult thing to take care of his sister. They were childhood sweethearts. When they grew up, they naturally developed into a couple. Then when they grew up, they got married and had children. Su Qinghui pitied Xiang Kaiping. He regarded her as a little sister of his. He had been given the responsibility of taking care of her since she was young. Su Qinghui had no objection to marrying Xiang Kaiping. It had become a habit for him to take care of Xiang Kaiping. It didn't matter if he took care of her for the rest of his life. The two of them had a verbal engagement, and they also set the date of their engagement and marriage. It was also at that time that he met Li Qianxue. She and Xiang Kaiping were completely different types of people. She was flamboyant, bright, and domineering. The first time they met, she pointed at his plan, questioned him, and he retorted very rudely. He didn't think there was a problem with his plan. Li Qianxue was clearly deliberately making things difficult for him. However, he also didn't know that his retorts and his rudeness became special in Li Qianxue's eyes. After all, at that time, who in the Li Corporation didn't look at Li Qianxue's eyes? Li Qianxue took a fancy to Su Qinghui. After going against each other again and again, she became more and more certain of her feelings. She liked Su Qinghui, and she thought that she had to get him. However, Li Qianxue was actually a little arrogant. When she found out that Su Qinghui had a childhood sweetheart, it wasn't that she didn't think of giving up. However, later on, the two of them competed for a client together. At that time, the Li Corporation wasn't like it was now, where everyone was eager to cooperate. That client was very difficult to deal with. The two of them went to several times separately, but they couldn't get the client. In the end, Li Qianxue decided to go together. Sure enough, she put down her pride and cooperated with Su Qinghui. The two of them went together, and that difficult client was actually taken down by the two of them. This was the first time Su Qinghui saw Li Qianxue's ability. It was also the first time Li Qianxue discovered that when Su Qinghui wasn't at odds with her, this man was like this. She couldn't help but invite him to celebrate the success of their first cooperation. Su Qinghui was young and full of mettle. When the two of them talked about that client, they couldn't help but drink a few more glasses. In the end, they were both drunk. As for what happened after that, it was hard to say. It was unknown who started it, and who took the initiative. Anyway, when Su Qinghui woke up the next day, he faced the scene of Li Qianxue sleeping naked next to him, and Old Master Li's gloomy face. Su Qinghui was sure that this was Li Qianxue's plan. She deliberately made him drunk, and she called Old Master Li. He didn't go to work. He thought about whether he should resign, but he didn't want to. He had just been promoted, and was already a department manager. If he resigned now, he would be a little unwilling. However, if he didn't resign, he hated Li Qianxue for setting him up. Under such circumstances, when Xiang Kaiping asked him why he didn't go to work, he didn't know why he rolled with Xiang Kaiping again. It was a mess. He himself felt that he was a mess at that time. However, Before he could figure it out and decide whether to resign or not, Old Master Li sent someone to call him to work. About you and Qianxue, as long as you marry her, I can pretend that nothing has happened. Su Qinghui was proud. He refused. He submitted his resignation. Half of it was avoidance, and the other half was guilt. For more than a week, he was with Xiang Kaiping day and night, trying to make up for it. Xiang Kaiping didn't know that she had a relationship with Su Qinghui for many years. Now seeing Su Qinghui treat her more gently and considerately, she didn't doubt it. She only felt happy, looking at the gentle and careful Xiang Kaiping. Su Qinghui seemed to feel less annoyed. However, he didn't expect that after that one time, Li Qianxue would actually get pregnant. She was pregnant with his child. He felt even more confused. He insisted on resigning, and didn't want to be with Li Qianxue. However, Old Master Li began to pressure him. He had nowhere to go if he left the Li Corporation. But at this time, his mother found out about these things. Su Qinghui was already the only son of the third generation. Mother Su couldn't let Li Qianxue abort the child. She begged him to marry Li Qianxue, and personally, went to Xiang Kaiping's mother to apologize. She said that Xiang Kaiping and Su Qinghui were not fated. Xiang Kaiping didn't expect such a thing to happen. In a rage, she said that the marriage between the two of them didn't count. She said that she would never marry Su Qinghui. In the end, Su Qinghui married Li Qianxue. He only found out after the marriage. At that time, not only Li Qianxue was pregnant, but Xiang Kaiping was also pregnant. Later, he was obsessed and thought that all this was because of Li Qianxue's scheme. In anger, Su Qinghui impulsively switched the child. Chapter 448. But now, because of Su Qingsang's words, Su Qinghui began to think about the answer after the impulse. In fact, he already had the answer in his heart, but he didn't dare to face it. He didn't dare to face his own mistakes. Did he really hate Li Qianxue? Yes, he did hate her at that time, but he hated himself more. He hated himself for not being strong enough, and for not thinking of a solution in time. He hated himself for not sorting things out with Li Qianxue, and getting together with Xiang Kaiping. It led to more chaos. It was like making another mistake, in order to make up for one. The end result was that the mistake was getting bigger and bigger. It was so big that it was too late for him to undo it. Su Qinghui stared at the building in front of him blankly. He realized that he had unknowingly driven the car home. Yes, this was his home. He had lived here for more than 20 years. After his parents passed away, he regarded Old Master Li as his father. Other than Old Master Li, Su Peijian was his daughter, and Su Yusin was his son. And Li Qianxue. Su Qinghui thought of Li Qianxue's face. He thought of the time when the two of them were always at odds. She was really beautiful. He couldn't deny that. Also, she was very capable and ambitious. In business, the two of them could be said to be perfect. After that cooperation, she got pregnant and forced him to get married. After she gave birth to the baby, she threw herself back into work. With the previous cooperation, even if Su Qinghui hated her for forcing him to marry her, he had to admit that she was talented in business. She was also very daring to think and act, and the two of them complemented each other well. Over the years, the Li Corporation was able to grow bigger and bigger, and it was also because of the efforts of the two of them. Other than business, Su Qinghui thought of the first few years of marriage. Li Qianxue knew that he didn't like her, so she tried her best to be good to him. She cared about him in every possible way. At that time, he hadn't been working for long. In addition, because of his family background, he didn't care so much about his image. But after marriage, his image was many times better than before. Because his clothes all year round were bought and matched by Li Qianxue. Her family background determined that she also had a good eye. Every night, she would prepare the clothes for him to wear when he went out the next day. Not only his clothes, but everything related to him. She did it herself. Initially, she had really made up her mind to be a good wife. She had even tried to learn how to cook. However, he really didn't have the talent, so he gave up. However, he had deliberately ignored all the good things that she had done for him. He hated her very much. He blamed her for Xiang Kaiping's departure, and he blamed her for his own grievance of having to marry her. He did not treat her well at all. He did not even sleep with her for a long time afterwards. If he hadn't drunk too much, Su Yusin wouldn't even have been born. But it was also that time. He discovered the hidden thoughts in his heart. He realized that he actually had a desire for Li Qianxue. How could this be? So he didn't care that she was shy and happy at the time. And he didn't care that he was the one who had violated her while he was drunk. He had thoroughly humiliated her. Tell her not to waste her efforts. He would not fall in love with her, nor would he accept her. He would never. It was also from that day onwards that Li Qianxue's attitude towards him finally changed. She began to give up. However, she didn't expect that she would be pregnant again after that one time. After Su Yusin was born, Li Qianxue began to focus on her son. It had to be said that Su Peijian was slowly growing up at this time. When she was young, she was still very cute. She loved to act coquettishly and liked to laugh. With Su Peijian around, the atmosphere in the house slowly became better. Su Yusin was also very cute when he was young. He didn't act like a boy, but he was more considerate to Li Qianxue than Su Peijian. Because of their two children, Su Qinghui and Li Qianxue began to maintain a respectful married life. On the surface, Li Qianxue still treated him the same as before, treating him as her husband. But he knew that it was different. In private, Li Qianxue finally gave up on him. If it weren't for old Master Li and their two children, perhaps they would have divorced a long time ago. When he found out that Li Qianxue's attitude had changed, he didn't know how he felt at that time. He could only convince himself that yes, this was good. That was good. He didn't love Li Qianxue in the first place, and she was the one who forced him to marry her. But only he knew in his heart that it wasn't good, not good at all. He didn't like Li Qianxue's cold face. He hated that she began to lose him in her eyes. He couldn't help but start to think that Li Qianxue actually didn't love him at all, right? Otherwise, how could she give up so easily? But he didn't think that it wasn't so easy to give up. That was because she slowly gave up after many years of effort, and still didn't get a response from him. He couldn't figure it out, and he didn't want to think about it. He stubbornly thought that he would wait for the future to reveal Su Peijian's background. He was so obsessed with taking revenge on her, stubbornly wanting to see Li Qianxue's face change. But did he really want to take revenge on her? No. He slowly began to not want to take revenge on her. But every time he saw Su Qingsang, he couldn't help but be afraid. That kind of emotion was too complicated. So complicated that he couldn't be too good to Su Qingsang. When Su Qingsang went to college, he couldn't wait to ask Su Qingsang to move out. He thought that when Su Qingsang got married, he would give her a dowry. He thought that he would make the best of the mistake. But sometimes when he saw Li Qianxue's cold face in private, he couldn't help but waver. Why should he give up? He wanted to take revenge. He wanted to let Li Qianxue know what she had done wrong. But did Li Qianxue really do anything wrong? No. She didn't. Su Qinghui closed his eyes weakly. No. Only now was he willing to admit it. Li Qianxue didn't do anything wrong. All the fault was caused by him. What did he mean by getting drunk? What did he mean by alcohol? If he didn't really have that kind of feelings for Li Qianxue, even if he was drunk, how could anything really happen? The so-called drunken sex was just an excuse to cover up his inner desire. If he was willing to admit it, he would know that he had long fallen in love with Li Qianxue. At a time when he didn't know, because she was so different, gorgeous, flamboyant like the sun, so that he couldn't move his eyes at all. He loved Li Qianxue, but he couldn't admit it, because deep in his heart, he still had a faint sense of inferiority. He was just an ordinary person from an ordinary family. But Li Qianxue was the daughter of the Li family, the future successor of the Li family. He wasn't sure if Li Qianxue's feelings for him were temporary or sincere. The inferiority in his heart made him refuse Li Qianxue. He didn't even hesitate to use Xiang Kaiping as an excuse. He and Xiang Kaiping grew up together. They were childhood sweethearts, and the elders of the two families arranged for them to be married. He thought that was love. In fact, he had a sibling relationship with Xiang Kaiping, but there was no love between a man and a woman. Otherwise, why would he dare to face his inner desire and have sex with Li Qianxue after he got drunk? It was funny that he didn't understand at the time. He thought that his pity for Xiang Kaiping was love. He also felt inferior in front of Li Qianxue, because he couldn't compare to her family background. His childish and ridiculous pride made him do a series of wrong things. In the end, he made more mistakes. Irredeemable. Su Qinghui suddenly laughed out loud. He was too stupid. He was really too stupid. Why didn't he realize his feelings earlier? Why didn't he realize it earlier? Li Qianxue was already different in his heart. Old Master Li should have seen through his feelings long ago, right? That was why he kept reminding him to think clearly about what was most important to him. Unfortunately, he was blinded by greed and didn't seriously think about what was most important to him. When he thought clearly, he was already irreparably wrong. His phone suddenly rang. He froze for a moment and picked up the phone from his seat. Li Qianxue's number was displayed on the screen, which made his heart beat faster. He seemed to have suddenly returned to many years ago, when he first met Li Qianxue. He stared at the phone for a long time before picking it up. His heart was beating very fast. He had a lot to say to Li Qianxue. He wanted to tell her that he had been wrong all along. Su Qinghui. Li Qianxue's cold voice was on the other end of the phone. It was a familiar voice, but at this moment, it sounded extremely strange. I heard from Lawyer Chen that you won't sign? A simple sentence was like a basin of cold water poured on Su Qinghui's head. His body instantly stiffened. I'm telling you, don't think about playing any tricks. If you still have the idea of giving the family property to Su Peijian, you should give up. I won't let you succeed. Her sharp words were no longer as gentle as Li Qianxue had been to him at first. They sounded very harsh. Su Qinghui was very uncomfortable. He wasn't used to such a sharp Li Qianxue. Qianxue, I don't care what you want to do. I'm telling you, I'm getting a divorce. Li Qianxue thought that he was dissatisfied with her conditions, and became more and more angry. Su Qinghui, I've given you everything that should be given to you. Don't think about what I shouldn't have given you. After so many years, I admit that even if I did something wrong back then, I helped you raise your daughter for so many years, and let my daughter suffer so much. I'm even with you, right? When Li Qianxue said this, she paused for a moment and calmed down. Su Qinghui, let's part on good terms. If you insist on having your way and refuse to sign, then I don't mind falling out with you. I'll reveal Peijian's identity as an illegitimate daughter to the entire Lin City. I want to see who will be embarrassed when the time comes. Qianxue. Su Qinghui didn't expect Li Qianxue's attitude to be so fierce. Chapter 449. After saying this, Li Qianxue hung up the phone without thinking. In fact, she had raised Su Peijian for more than 20 years. It wasn't that she hadn't thought about what Su Qingsang had said before. She didn't want to ruin Su Peijian, unless it was absolutely necessary. Su Peijian would become an illegitimate daughter, and wouldn't be able to raise her head in Lin City. However, Su Qinghui's refusal to sign annoyed her. In her opinion, Su Qinghui was simply greedy. She felt that she had gotten too little from them. Or was it that he hadn't had enough revenge? Did he want to continue? Either way, Li Qianxue wasn't willing to accompany him. Su Qinghui was stunned for a long time when he was interrupted. His heart, which had been beating wildly just now, slowly calmed down. He looked at the phone for a long time, and called Li Qianxue back. Su Qinghui, what else do you want? Qianxue, I won't sign. Su Qinghui seemed to have finally found his voice. He looked at the Li family's mansion in front of him. Listening to Li Qianxue's breathing on the other end of the phone, he spoke very seriously, word by word. You are the most precious to me. You. Li Qianxue didn't expect to hear this. What do you want? I don't want to divorce you. Su Qinghui said very seriously. Su Qinghui said very seriously. Now I finally know that you are the one I cherish the most. There was a few seconds of silence on the other end of the phone. Li Qianxue sneered. Are you trying to use this method to make me agree not to divorce you? I'm not. I'm telling you, don't even think about it. Li Qianxue's voice was even angrier than before. Su Qinghui, put away your dirty thoughts. If you think that you can make me not divorce you with a few sweet words, you're dreaming. After saying this, Li Qianxue hung up the phone without thinking. But even after the phone was hung up, she still felt that she couldn't take it. She couldn't help but call Su Qinghui again. The day after tomorrow at the latest. If you don't sign, I'll let the whole Lin city know about Su Peixian's background. That's all. After saying this, Li Qianxue hung up the phone and turned it off. When she looked up, she found that Su Qingsang had arrived and was standing at the door looking at her. Feeling a little uncomfortable, she stood up and walked towards Su Qingsang. Why didn't you tell me when you came up? Aren't you downstairs accompanying Grandpa? Yes. Su Qingsang nodded and looked at Li Qianxue holding her hand. Grandpa is playing chess with Yusen. I don't really understand it either. I came to look for you. Just now, Nanny Zhang said that it's almost time to eat, so she asked me to call you downstairs. Okay. Li Qianxue calmed down and took Su Qingsang's hand. Thinking that she might have heard him on the phone just now, he felt a little uncomfortable. Qingsang, you won't blame me, right? Why should I blame you? I'm afraid you'll blame me for being too ruthless and kick your father out. After all, Su Qingsang and Su Qinghui were father and daughter. She was afraid that Su Qinghui would blame her. If you really blame me, there's nothing I can do. Me and Dad, I really can't live on anymore. I understand you. I won't blame you. It was a miracle that Li Qianxue could endure it until now. If it was any other woman, she would have already flared up. That's good. Li Qianxue held Su Qingsang's hand and walked outside. From now on, your grandfather and I, as well as you two, will depend on each other. Su Qingsang glanced at her and bit her lip. She seemed to be in a dilemma. What's wrong? Aren't you happy to live with me? Li Qianxue was really worried. She didn't forget. She didn't have a good relationship with Su Qingsang before. No. Su Qingsang still decided to tell the truth. Mom, I know you just recognized me and can't bear to leave me. But I'm married to Hu Jingyao after all. He's going back to Rong City now. It's not right for me to still be here. I'm thinking if I should go to Rong City in a few days. No. Li Qianxue held her hand tightly. How can you leave? I just recognized you. Mom, there's still a long way to go. Su Qingsang thought of Hu Manzi's words. Hu Jingyao has a big family at home. I've only gone back once since we got married. Now I'm not going back for the new year. And I'm not going back for the holidays. It's really not good. Then, Li Qianxue said a few words, but couldn't say anything. When she got married, her status was higher than Su Qinghui's. Su Qinghui's parents almost always flattered her. Later, less than 2 years after Su Yusen was born, Su Qinghui's parents passed away. She didn't even have a proper mother-in-law. Even so, it didn't mean that she didn't understand the ways of the world. What kind of family did Hu Jingyao come from? It wasn't that she didn't know before. In the past, she thought that Su Qingsang was lucky to marry into a family like Hu Jingyao, and that she might not be able to bear the responsibility of being the eldest granddaughter-in-law. Now hearing Su Qingsang say that, she began to feel bad again. But no matter how bad she felt, she knew that Su Qingsang was telling the truth. She was already married, and was no longer alone. Thinking of this, Li Qianshua's heart was upset again. Look at you. I've only known you for a few days. You didn't spend more time with me. Su Qingsang didn't know what to say. She also felt very sorry for Li Qianxue. Mom, I'm sorry. Okay. If you want to go, go. But you have to go 2 days later. Tomorrow is definitely not possible. A few days later, let Mom arrange it. Su Qingsang was very surprised. She looked at Li Qianxue blankly, and for a moment, she thought that she had heard wrong. What? Do you think I won't let you go? Li Qianxue really wanted to do that. Now I feel that Hu Jingyao is getting off too easy. I didn't like him in the past. Now I don't like him even more. She didn't love her daughter enough. Thinking about it, she felt that Hu Jingyao was getting off too easy. Mom. Su Qingsang smiled. Don't worry. I'll definitely come back to see you. Okay. Who wants you to come back? I've thought about it. I'll go with you. Li Qianxue really couldn't bear to part with her daughter. Anyway, your grandfather and I haven't been out for a long time. We'll book plane tickets and go to Rong City together for 10 days to half a month. That's good. I haven't had much fun in Rome City myself. Su Qingsang smiled, feeling that the dark clouds in her heart had dissipated. She hooked her arm around Li Qinshua's arm. Mom, thank you. Li Qinshua's concession was actually for her. Su Qingsang's heart was slightly touched. Don't thank me, silly child. You and I never need to say thank you. Li Qianxue suddenly stopped and looked at Su Qingsang with a serious face. I also want to be a selfish mother. But I want you to be happy more. She already owed Su Qingsang a lot. How could she have the heart to delay her marriage? The so-called husband and wife were actually mutual. She also knew how much Hu Jinyao had done for Su Qingsang in the past. If Su Qingsang wanted to live a happy life with Hu Jinyao in the future, it was also very important to think from another perspective. Su Qingsang bit her lip and felt her eyes become a little moist. Qingsang, I've been a failure in my life. It's also very hard, because it's very tiring to give unilaterally and not get anything in return. Although Hu Jinyao doesn't like him very much. But if he treats you well, you have to treat him well too. Otherwise, after a long time, his heart will become cold. Li Qianxue was talking about her and Hu Jinyao, but Su Qingsang knew that she was also thinking about herself. Mom, don't worry. I know. It's good that you know. Su Qingsang thought about it and couldn't help but say, Mom, you're still young. If you can really meet a good man in the future. In fact, it's okay to start over. Why? You don't like your own father and want to find a stepfather? Su Qinghui had broken Li Qianshue's heart. How could she be in the mood to find a good man? However, she didn't want her daughter to worry, and she didn't want Su Qingsang to think too much. She held Su Qingsang's arm and walked downstairs. Don't worry. Even at this age, I'm still as beautiful as a flower. I can still handle 1 or 2 men. I'll find a young and handsome one later. That's good. I'll help you to consider when the time comes. When the two talked about these things, they were like a real mother and daughter. It was as if the estrangement of the past 20 years didn't exist at all. The Lantern Festival. Compared with the desolation during the Spring Festival, the Su house was much more lively today. Old Master Li was happy to have his granddaughter back. Although he couldn't announce it to the world and let the entire Lin city know that Su Qingsang was the real daughter of a rich family. But it was still possible to let the relatives of the Li family know. Among the relatives of the same generation as Old Master Li, there was a cousin of Old Master Li and a cousin of his. The rest were the descendants of these two people. There were also a few other relatives from the side branches. They were distant, but they still had contact with each other. Old Master Li invited these people, and they came early in the morning. The servants received the order, set up tea early, and began to serve these guests. Su Qingsang was still upstairs. Li Qianxue felt that this was the first time her daughter showed up. Even if it was only relatives, it had to be grand. Yesterday, she had asked someone to send a dress over, and today, she opened her safe. In it were the jewelry she had collected over the years. Take a look and see which one you like. Li Qianxue, who had just recognized Su Qingsang, couldn't wait to give her all the good things. It was Su Qingsang's first time here. Looking at the jewelry, she felt a little dizzy. Mom, you don't have to be so dramatic, do you? Yes. Li Qianxue looked at the clothes her daughter was wearing. Take a look and see which one you like. I'll give them all to you. But you'll wear one today. The mother and daughter picked out the jewelry, while Old Master Li and Su Yusen downstairs entertained the guests. No one said what it was about. They waited for Su Qingsang to come downstairs. At the same time, at the gate of the courtyard outside the garden, as soon as Su Peijian got out of the car, she saw the cars in the parking lot in the courtyard. There were many cars parked there, and she recognized a few of them. They were the relatives of the family. She had seen them drive before. In the distance, she could still hear the laughter in the house. Su Peijian suddenly felt a little upset. Chapter 450. Su Peijian was supposed to stay in her apartment that day. However, when she called Li Qianxue earlier, she didn't say if she could go back. She didn't dare to call Su Qinghui. It was this uneasy feeling that made her stay in the apartment for the whole day. Although someone took care of her daily life, how could it compare to home? Yesterday was fine, But today was the holiday. Whether it was on Weibo or WeChat Moments, they were all celebrating the holiday. Su Peijian really couldn't stand it anymore. She really didn't want to stay alone. Even if she risked being scolded, she had to go home. Staying with her parents was better than staying in the apartment alone. However, she didn't expect to see such a busy scene. As soon as she returned to the Su family, she suddenly felt sad. Even if she wasn't at home, they could still celebrate the holiday happily? Su Peijian couldn't tell how she felt. In the past, she felt that her parents loved her, but now she felt that she was a little self-righteous. She didn't hold back her anger, so she quickly walked inside. She really wanted to ask her parents if they didn't care at all that she wasn't at home. Upstairs, Su Qingseng looked at the jewelry and felt that her eyes were blurry. She looked at Li Qianxue silently. "Mom, you've changed 3 sets. I think the one just now is very good. You don't need to change anymore." "No. I still feel that it's not luxurious enough." Li Qianxue really wanted to put all the jewelry in the room on Su Qingseng. After looking around, she finally picked up a set of pink diamond jewelry. "I want them to know that my daughter deserves the best." Su Qingseng couldn't refuse Li Qianxue's kindness. She could see it in the past few days. If she didn't let Li Qianxue make up for it, she was afraid that she wouldn't be able to get over it. Moreover, these things really weren't much to Li Qianxue. In the end, she didn't stingy and let Li Qianxue put the set of jewelry on her. Li Qianxue took a step back and looked at Su Qingseng. "My daughter is so beautiful. Mom is beautiful too." Although today's banquet was a little rushed, Li Qianxue wasn't unprepared. She had asked someone to bring the dress over yesterday. Her dress was light pink, and Li Qianxue's was white. Although the color was different, the style was very similar, especially the dark rose pattern embroidered on their chests. When the two of them stood together, people would think that they were a pair of beautiful sisters. "Oh right. I heard that you have a good friend. Why didn't you invite her today?" Su Qingseng was a little embarrassed. She hadn't told Shi Mengwan about staying in Lin City. She thought she was already in Rong City. Her background was too complicated, and she couldn't explain it clearly in a short time. Su Qingseng planned to tell her about it after today. "She has work to do. Let's talk to her in a few days." Li Qianxue's expression suddenly changed. "Qingseng, don't tell me you still don't want to acknowledge me? That's why you didn't tell your friend." "Mom, what are you thinking?" Su Qingseng felt a little helpless toward Li Qianxue. She didn't know if it was because of the previous loss that Li Qianxue was particularly concerned about her. She felt a little helpless. "That's good. I'll treat her to a meal sometime next time." As Li Qianxue spoke, she tucked a strand of hair that fell from Su Qingseng's cheek behind her ear. "Qingseng, in the future, your friends, your colleagues, and Hu Jinyao's relatives in Rong City. I want to get to know them all. Don't think that I'm annoying. I always feel that it's not real. When I think about how Su Chunghui once wanted to send you to an orphanage, my heart can't stand it." Li Qianxue even felt lucky that Su Chunghui hadn't lost the last trace of humanity. If Su Qingseng was really sent to an orphanage by him, now even if she knew that Su Peijian wasn't her daughter, how could she find her daughter in this big world? "Mom, Dad isn't that kind of person." Su Chunghui might have thought about it back then, but he didn't do it after all. "Don't mention him." Li Qianxue was annoyed at the mention of Su Chunghui, especially yesterday. In order not to divorce, he even said that she was his most precious person. Li Qianxue felt that it was more disgusting than eating a fly. She had been married to Su Chunghui for so long, but she couldn't see that he was such a hypocritical person. "Okay, don't mention it. Mom, let's go down." Just now, she heard faint laughter coming from downstairs. "Most of the guests should be here by now, right? Let's go." Li Qianxue glanced at Su Qingseng again, then finally held her hand and led her downstairs. Just as they walked to the stairs, they met Su Yusin, who had come to pick them up. Su Yusin looked at the mother and daughter in similar clothes in front of him and touched his nose. "Mom, I have 2 sisters now, right? You only know how to talk nonsense." Li Qianxue was also in a good mood. She had always maintained herself well. Standing next to Su Qingseng, they did not look like mother and daughter, but more like sisters. "Come." Two beautiful ladies, please give me this honor. Take your hands and go downstairs. Su Yusin bent down and reached out to the two of them. Su Qingsang wanted to laugh, but she also felt a little touched. She put her hand in Su Yusin's. However, Su Yusin still handed her hand to Li Qianxue, then stood next to Li Qianxue. The two siblings followed Li Qianxue downstairs, one on the left and one on the right. Li Qianxue looked at her son, and then at her daughter. Suddenly, she felt that as long as they were there, nothing else mattered. On the other side, when Su Peijian walked to the gate, she met Xiaoyu, the maid of the Su family. When she saw Su Peijian, she was shocked. Miss? Wasn't Miss in the United States? Why was she back? No. Madam said it yesterday. In the future, the Miss of the family would be Miss Su Qingsang. But now Su Peijian was back. What should I do? Su Peijian was displeased by Xiaoyu's shocked expression. She glared at her. What are you doing? Don't you recognize me? Miss. Xiaoyu thought of what Madam said today, and was a little anxious. As servants, they didn't know much about the master's affairs. But this morning, they were reminded by the housekeeper. It was the day when Su Qingsang returned to the family. Since Su Qingsang was the miss of the Su family, Su Peijian was naturally not. Xiaoyu knew Su Peijian's temper well after working in the old mansion for so many years. She had a bad temper. She always meant what she said. If Su Peijian knew what happened today, she didn't know what would happen later. Xiaoyu was very anxious now. She wanted to stop Su Peijian, but she didn't have the ability. She didn't want to stop her. She was afraid that the housekeeper and Li Qianxue would blame her later. Mississippi, you came here on such a cold day. It must be very cold, right? It's quite windy outside today. Why don't we go to the kitchen, have a bowl of hot soup, and then see Madam? There were two doors in the kitchen. One was from the dining room, and the other was a small door for the servants to go in and out. Xiaoyu wanted to take Su Peijian to the kitchen and ask Li Qianxue what to do. Li Qianxue was annoyed by Xiaoyu's words. I'm not cold. Get out of the way. I want to see my mother. No, Mississippi. I'm really doing this for your own good. You see, it's really cold today. You see, your face is red. Why don't we go into the kitchen first? Get out of the way. Su Peijian pushed Xiaoyu. Xiaoyu was caught off guard and took 2 or 3 steps to the side. Unprepared, Xiaoyu retreated 2 or 3 steps to the side. She was even more anxious now. Su Peijian was like this. If she really let her in, she was afraid that she would cause trouble. Miss, listen to me. What did you call me? Su Peijian seemed to have only just realized. She was always addressed as eldest miss at home. Su Yusin was the young master. But today, Xiaoyu kept calling her Mississippi. Who are you calling Miss? Don't you know the rules? I'm telling you, I'll ask my mother to fire you. After saying this, Su Peijian was about to rush inside again. Xiaoyu was so anxious that she didn't care anymore. She stopped Su Peijian. Miss, you can go in if you want. But listen to me. There's a guest inside today. If you're unhappy about something, you should calm down. Guest? What guest? Su Peijian sneered. Is there any guest in the house that I don't know? Do I need you to talk? Mississippi. If you call me miss again, I'll sew your mouth shut. Su Peijian pointed at Xiaoyu fiercely, and her fierce eyes scared Xiaoyu. She wanted to persuade her again, but Uncle Zhang happened to come out at this time. Seeing Su Peijian, Uncle Zhang was also stunned. He didn't expect Su Peijian to come back so suddenly. The servants of the Su family didn't know, but Uncle Zhang, who had lived in this big house with old Master Li for half of his life, knew it very well. Since the real miss was back, the fake one was naturally worthless. Today was Su Qingsang's good day. It was also the first time she showed her face in front of people. How could Uncle Zhang let Su Peijian go in and ruin it? Miss, you're back? Look at you. Why didn't you call to tell me? I could have sent someone to pick you up. Uncle Zhang, where are my parents? Su Peijian looked inside, and didn't want to be polite to Uncle Zhang at all. Xiaoyu stopped me from going in. You won't stop me from going in too, will you? Of course not. My good Mississippi. But now there are many people inside, and it's noisy. If you ask me, you must be covered in dust on your way back. Why don't you go upstairs and tidy up and come back? If Su Peijian had just been impulsive to see Li Qianxue and Su Qinghui, now, she could completely guess that something was very wrong with today's events. She slightly narrowed her eyes and glanced at Uncle Zhang and Xiao Yu's faces. She pushed the two of them away, and before they could stop her, she quickly rushed into the gate. At the same time, Li Qianxue had already gone downstairs with her son and daughter. They walked to the staircase. In the living room, old Master Li saw his daughters coming downstairs and was the first to stand up. As soon as he stood up, the others also stood up. As soon as they stood up, they blocked Su Peijian's view. Chapter 451. Qingsang Yusen. Come here. Old Master Li reached out to Su Qingsang and Su Yusen, especially to Su Qingsang. His eyes were filled with love. The bad feeling in Su Peijian's heart grew stronger and stronger. Her body began to stiffen as she stood there. What was going on? Why was Su Qingsang standing beside her mother? Why did Grandpa speak to Su Qingsang in such a gentle voice? Su Peijian's mind was full of questions. She couldn't help but want to rush forward, but her body couldn't move. Behind him, Uncle Chun and Xiao Yu had already entered. The two of them wanted to stop him, but they couldn't. After looking at each other, they shrunk their heads and went back to the kitchen. Forget it. I'll just pretend I didn't see it. Anyway, Su Peijian could be considered the owner of the house. They had no right to stop it. Su Qingsang was a little nervous when she saw the large group of people in the living room, even though she had met these relatives before. But at that time, she was just an illegitimate daughter, a nobody in the Su family. But now it was completely different. She couldn't help but glance at Li Qianxue. Li Qianxue stood behind her. When their eyes met, she held her hand tightly and led her to old Master Li. I have invited everyone here today because I have something to announce. When old Master Li said this, he was still a little emotional. He was old, and his health was not particularly good. Because of Su Qingsang, she hadn't been able to sleep well. Previously, we all knew that the Su family had another daughter. That is Qingsang. Old Master Li took Su Qingsang's hand and stood beside Su Qingsang with Li Qianxue. Because of Li Qianxue's warm and soft hands, Su Qingsang felt the tension in her heart dissipate a lot. In fact, Qianxue gave birth to a child in the hospital at the same time as someone else. After the baby was born, the nurse switched the baby. Old Master Li spoke casually, but the other guests at the scene all stared at him with wide eyes. Was it a mistake? How was this a mistake? As a matter of fact, we only found out about it recently, because of an accident. So Su Qingsang is Qianxue's daughter. This matter can't be faked. We've already done a paternity test. Whispers and gasps could be heard from the audience. Those gazes once again landed on Su Qingsang. And those gazes with different meanings made Su Qingsang feel uneasy. The reason I called you here today is to explain Qingsang's background to you. Now that I know Qingsang's identity, I will naturally give her the treatment she deserves. Old Master Li's words were loud and clear as he looked at the people in the middle of the living room. He didn't finish his sentence, but his meaning was clear. Su Qingsang had been switched at the wrong place, so everyone thought she was an illegitimate daughter. But now, she was no longer an illegitimate daughter, but a legitimate daughter of a wealthy family. Therefore, these people had to consider their attitude towards Su Qingsang in the future. Also, Su Qingsang was now the granddaughter of the Li family. She was also the eldest daughter of the Su family. If others dared to look down on and be rude to Su Qingsang like before, the Li family would not let it go so easily. Those who were invited today were all relatives of the Li family. All of them were shrewd people. After hearing what old Master Li said, what else could they not understand? Great-grandfather Li, who was old Master Li's cousin, and Li Qianxue had to call him Grandpa, smiled and nodded. So you've recognized your granddaughter? It seems that this is really a joyous occasion. As he spoke, he took out a box from his pocket and handed it to Su Qingsang. Here, since you've recognized your granddaughter, this is a greeting gift. Su Qingsang didn't take the box immediately. She naturally knew great-grandfather Li, but she turned to look at Li Qianxue. Li Qianxue patted the back of her hand and said, "This is a gift from your grandpa." You should accept it. Old Master Li's cousins were of the same generation as him. Before they came, Old Master Li had informed them of the situation. Su Qingsang accepted the box and bowed to Great-Grandfather Li. Thank you, Grandpa. Okay. Great-Grandfather Li nodded repeatedly, obviously very satisfied with Su Qingsang's politeness. Great-Grandfather Li gave her a greeting gift. That great-aunt was not stingy. Your grandpa told us in a hurry, and I didn't prepare anything. I also have a little toy here. You can wear it and play with it. Great-aunt took out a velvet box, which looked like a bracelet. Su Qingsang took it and nodded to her. Thank you, Great-aunt. The two elders had already expressed their gratitude. Their nephew was of the same generation as Li Qianxue, so they had to express their gratitude. However, they had come in a hurry today, unlike Great-Grandfather Li, who had received the news beforehand. For a moment, the group of people didn't know what to give. Great-Grandfather Li's son suddenly remembered that there was a piece of jewelry in his car that he had prepared as a gift. It was also very expensive, so it was a suitable gift. He was about to take it, but unexpectedly, when he turned around, he saw Su Peijian standing outside of their circle. Niece. Just now, Li Qianxue was busy introducing people to Su Qingsang, and Old Master Li had been staring at the guests. He planned to directly throw out the paternity test report if anyone questioned it. Su Yusen stood with a few people of the same generation. The group of people didn't pay attention to what was happening outside of the group of people in the living room, so no one noticed that Su Peijian was also there. When he called her niece, Su Qingsang glanced at him. At the same time, she also saw Su Peijian. The moment their eyes met, Su Qingsang clearly saw the shock in Su Peijian's eyes, and she saw Su Peijian. So did Old Master Li and the others. The moment Old Master Li saw Su Peijian, he felt a little awkward and uncomfortable. In fact, it was natural for them to recognize Su Qingsang. However, Su Peijian had been with them for so many years, and they had feelings for each other. Although they hated what Su Qinghui had done, no one wanted to blame it on Su Peijian. After all, ignorance was not a crime. In the past few days, Li Qianxue and Old Master Li had been thinking about Su Peijian's situation and what she would do in the future. Because of this consideration, the father and daughter had specially discussed how to treat Su Peijian in the future. After so many years of raising her, she was an adopted daughter. They would pick a time for Su Qinghui to explain the situation to her. Later, they would give her a dowry, so that she could get married in a grand way. It could be considered that they had done their best. However, no one would have thought that Su Peijian would suddenly come back, and she happened to see the scene of them bringing Su Qingsang to meet people. For a moment, Old Master Li and his daughter felt a little uncomfortable. In just a short while, Su Peijian had already recovered from the stiffness she'd felt earlier. Chapter 452. Su Peijian was standing outside the crowd. Su Qingsang was in the limelight. She watched how Old Master Li and Li Qianxue protected Su Qingsang and made her the daughter of the Su family. For a moment, she thought she had misheard, that there was something wrong with her ears. How could Su Qingsang be the daughter of the Su family? How could she be Li Qianxue's daughter? Li Qianxue's daughter was obviously her. It should be her. Su Peijian closed her eyes and tried hard to control the expression on her face. She did not want to look too ferocious. It's hard though. No one in the living room spoke. Su Qingsang's family background was announced. Everyone knew who Su Peijian was, and there was no need to ask anymore. Even if he didn't know where Su Peijian came from, or whose daughter she was, he would never forget. But looking at the current situation, what else was there to be confused about? Everyone was silent as they watched the once high-spirited Miss Su walk into the middle of the crowd. Li Qianxue had raised Su Peijian for more than 20 years, so she knew her daughter very well. At this moment, seeing her walking directly towards her, she inexplicably felt a little guilty. But that kind of guilty conscience only lasted for a moment. She believed that all these years, her motherly love for Su Peijian had come from the bottom of her heart. She had never done anything wrong to Su Peijian. Even now, she and Old Master Li still planned to give her the status and treatment that an adopted daughter of the Su family deserved. Thinking of this, Li Qianxue calmed down a lot. Peijian is back. You must be tired from the journey back. Let's go upstairs and rest. Li Qianxue looked at Su Peijian with a glimmer of hope in her eyes. He hoped that Su Peijian would be sensible and understand his hints. He hoped that she would know what kind of occasion this was. She had doted on Su Peijian for so many years, and she really treated her as one of her successors. She thought that Su Peijian might be able to discern something like that. I'm not tired. It wasn't that Su Peijian didn't see Li Qianxue's hint, and it wasn't that she didn't know how ugly she looked right now. However, there were some things that she really couldn't control. For example, she was inexplicably replaced by someone else. She didn't even know what had happened. Mom, Grandpa, I heard something just now, but I didn't quite understand what it meant. Mom, why don't you tell me? She spoke calmly, her clenched fists showing obvious restraint. When she saw Su Qingsang's face, she suddenly raised her hand. How did you change your daughter? Shouldn't I be your daughter? In fact, she also wanted to ask Su Qingsang why. What do you mean by mistaken identity? How could there be a mistake? She would never believe such a lousy excuse. It had been fine for so many years. You came all the way here to say that you made a mistake? Su Qingsang subtly took a small step back. It wasn't that she was afraid of Su Peijian, but she didn't want to make her presence as small as possible. She didn't want Su Peijian to think that she was showing off. Su Yusin noticed her movements. He silently squeezed her hand and took a step forward. Sister, go back to your room and rest first. We'll talk later. Don't call me sister yet. Su Peijian looked at Su Yusin. She didn't miss Su Yusin's little action just now. She felt even worse. She's your sister now, isn't she? Li Qianxue frowned and finally realized something. She had spoiled Su Peijian too much. Peijian, Yusin said that we'll talk later. I don't want to talk later. I want to talk now. Su Peijian's voice was quite rude. She pointed at Su Qingsang, who was standing next to Li Qianxue. She's just an illegitimate daughter. I just want to know what right she has now, and what right she has. She can stand here. Li Qianxue didn't like to hear the words illegitimate daughter now. If it weren't for Su Qinghui's selfishness and ruthlessness, how could her daughter have grown up with the title of illegitimate daughter? That was a misunderstanding. I said it just now. When she was born, the doctor made a mistake. Qingsang is not an illegitimate daughter. What about me? Su Peijian couldn't help raising her voice. If she's not an illegitimate daughter, then what am I? Huh? Tell me. What am I? Her questioning tone made Li Qianxue a little uncomfortable. The room was full of relatives. She really couldn't lose her temper like this. Peijian, I'll say it again. If you have anything to say, you can talk later. Go upstairs and rest for a while. I said I'm not tired. I don't want to rest. Su Peijian was quite stubborn. Can't I ask? Don't I have the right to know? Am I not your daughter? Su Peijian's anger only grew as she questioned him in return. Old Master Li's face was a little ugly. It was only a matter of time before Su Peijian came to find him, but he didn't expect it to be so sudden. Peijian, Old Master Li said. No matter what, today was not only a holiday, but also a good day for Su Qingsang. He hoped that everything would go smoothly. Peijian, since you're back, take a rest. There are so many guests at home now. If you have anything to say, you can talk later. Old Master Li's words were light, but there was an irresistible majesty. If it were any other day, Su Peijian would definitely listen to him. However, today was not a normal day. Instead, because of Old Master Li's words, Su Peijian became angry. She took a step forward and directly faced Old Master Li and Li Qianxue. So now I'm the one who is not welcomed in this family, right? So before I know what I've done wrong, I've already lost the right to speak in this family, right? Is that so? Li Qianxue frowned. For the first time, she found that this daughter of hers was a little too aggressive. Why aren't you saying anything? Isn't that the case? Su Peijian was really angry and unhappy. She didn't hide her unhappiness. Grandpa, Mom, don't I even have the right to understand the situation? Aren't you going to tell me what happened? Su Qingsang didn't speak. At this time, it was inappropriate for her to say anything. Su Yusin was silent. No matter what, he and Su Peijian had been siblings since they were children. If possible, he didn't want her to make things too ugly. Li Qianxue felt a headache coming on. She hated Su Qinghui more and more. If it weren't for him, she wouldn't have to face such a situation. If it weren't for Su Qinghui, she could be happily accompanying her original daughter now. Su Peijian suddenly smiled and nodded heavily. Her gaze swept across the people in front of her. Good. Really good. It's really good. She suddenly stood in front of Su Qingsang and stared straight at Su Qingsang's face with her beautiful almond-shaped eyes. They refused to answer my questions, but you should be able to, right? Su Qingsang. She raised her chin and stared at Su Qingsang's face. You should be able to explain how you went from an illegitimate daughter to the eldest daughter of the Su family. You should also be able to explain what methods you used to make my mother, my brother, and my grandfather all stand on your side? Right. Where's my dad? Why isn't my dad here? I also want to ask my dad if he was also bewitched by you. Su Qingsang pursed her lips into a straight line. It wasn't that she didn't know how to answer Su Peijian's question. And no matter how she answered, Su Peijian might not accept that answer. Peijian? Li Qianxue couldn't listen to it anymore. In the past, when Su Peijian made things difficult for Su Qingsang, she didn't know Su Qingsang's identity. So naturally, she didn't feel much. But now that her biological daughter was being embarrassed by Su Peijian in front of her, she couldn't stand it anymore. Watch your words. Watch what I should watch. Su Peijian was getting angrier. The more Li Qianxue defended Su Qingsang, the angrier she got. What can I watch? I'm about to be robbed of everything. Can't I ask clearly? How my mother, my brother, and my grandfather were taken away from me. Can't I ask? She didn't look at Li Qianxue and stared at Su Qingsang again. Tell me, what kind of method did you use? What kind of trick did you use? Tell me. I just want to know, why are you here? Why are you robbing me of everything? Su Qingsang clenched her hands by her side and bit her lips slightly. Before Li Qianxue could speak, she pressed her arm and turned to face Su Peijian. If you want to know why, we can tell you. But are you sure that you want to say it here? Her eyes were extremely clear, without a trace of dissatisfaction or unhappiness in them. She looked at Su Peijian like this, and her eyes showed the most sincere advice to her. If you really want to know, we can say it here. But do you really want to listen? Do you really want us to say it now here? She wanted to remind Su Peijian that she wasn't the only one here, not just the few of them. If Su Peijian continued to make a scene, her identity would definitely be exposed. Li Qianxue had decided to give her the dignity that an adopted daughter of the Su family deserved. But if Su Peijian insisted on continuing to ask, how could others not guess that she was the illegitimate daughter of the Su family? With her personality, could she really stand her identity changing from a legitimate daughter of a wealthy family to an illegitimate daughter? Su Peijian bit her lip and looked at Su Qingsang almost with a bit of resentment. Her eyes, which kept changing emotions, were obviously filled with resentment and dissatisfaction. Tell me. Why not? Why can't you tell me? Su Peijian raised her voice when she said the last three words. She lost her usual calmness and demeanor. Anger made her sharp, and she desperately wanted to know an answer. Li Qianxue frowned. At this time, she was slightly disappointed in Su Peijian. Peijian, if you really want to know, come with me. As mother and daughter, Li Qianxue was willing to protect Su Peijian's dignity in her. However, Su Peijian didn't want to think that way. She looked at Li Qianxue and only felt that she had changed. Did she want her to disappear from here now? Did she want her to get out of here quickly, so that she could make room for Su Qingsang? She stared at the people in front of her, who used to be her closest family. There was obvious pain and anger in her eyes. You're tuning in to the Dreamy Chapters YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.